for December 15th, 2021. As I've mentioned in the past meetings, if you prefer to access this meeting remotely, access information is available on Channel 18, on YouTube Channel 18. You can also dial in by the phone, and I will give you that information. It's 1-408-650-3123, and the access code is 980-161-557. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 48 North Road for a proposed bulkhead and fiber rolls. Good evening.
Good evening. Lindsay Strode, Cape Organics, representing the Doyles. Just briefly, we had Greg Berman on site. Several of you folks were there. He submitted a letter, and I'm just going to go through the reply as we had understood it. I've gone through this with Amy. So speaking to Greg's initial comment about geotextile materials, the geotextile materials was there primarily as secondary sediment mitigation, and he had indicated that he felt as though that the geotextiles inhibited the plants that we installed from establishing, which isn't necessarily the case. We didn't plant the face of the fiber rolls because there was just, again, it's a very unique site, as you've all are aware. It was just too steep, and there wasn't anything that would grow right there, so we planted behind them and in front of them. And to that point, some of that material is still there. Some of the groundsel bush and the bayberry are there at the landward end, and then we have the alterniflora, the marsh cordgrass at the seaward, that's at the seaward end. He also talked about that geotextile limiting the life of the fiber rolls, and in all honesty, fiber rolls are 3 to 6 years. We got a little bit better there with the maintenance program. So again, I'm not for sure what he was concerned about with the the geotextile application in that situation. One of the issues that he also had brought up was the developing coastal beach to the north. Again, from what little short-term memory I have, I don't recall a beach there back in '07. That being said, there is a significantly undermined portion of the coastal bank just north of the fiber roll array, and I'm reasonably sure that that's where a decent amount of that sediment has come from. At the same time, and Amy and I have talked about this, there's a lot of sediment in that area, but there's a large coastal bank on the other side of the river that's eroding primarily on the incoming tide that carries it. Again, this is just my anecdotal experience on the river. That material gets brought up to that sandbar. That sandbar, again, is continuing to push the thread of the channel westward, and a combination of that and the undermined portion of the coastal bank just north of the fiber roll array is likely where that sediment has come from. Understand too, when the commission approved the project back in '07, there has been little, if any, sediment until more recently that has come out of that coastal bank area that we're looking to put in the coastal erosion or coastal engineering structure. So any sediment that would have come out, because of the depth of the river right there, gravity would pull it right to the bottom. More than likely, it's not going to go north. The biggest impact to that particular area is on the outgoing tide, the ebb tide, and because of the longer fetch to the north, you'll see that is your biggest impact, especially with it bouncing off the other jetty or the other revetment and the bulkhead there. And just the fact that sandbar is pushing that thread of the channel further west, that most of that sediment would be going to the south. So all of that to say, we don't see this area as a significant or even a limited source of sediment to any downdrift beaches. Timber sheeting, we took the Commission's and Greg's recommendation. We'd be removing the timber sheeting because it was purely aesthetic. We'd be removing the piles and exposing the corrugated nature of the sheet piling to mitigate some of that laminar that flow along the face and mitigate, again, any end scour. We certainly don't want that bulkhead to be flanked, so we would be maintaining it consistently and with the use of fiber rolls on either end, protecting that particular area. His alternatives analysis, he had spoke to a bulkhead, an overwash bulkhead with a coir envelope, and I'm assuming he was referring to a double 1,000-gram matting, making basically an envelope or a sandwich. The problem again there is that that's going to be exposed to that intertidal area, and because of, again, the western migration of the thread of the channel, the higher tides, that in my estimation would last even less than what we had put in originally. He also mentioned the reduction in size of the platform that's out there. We really, again, don't have the room to do that because the road is so close. The angle of repose would be such that we'd actually be increasing the erosion. And two, that area is deconsolidated material. There's no parent material in that location. So it would move even faster once the coir was degraded. He also mentioned root wads or bagged shell. Again, because of the depth of the river of 6 to 8 feet, again, literally right under the walkway to the float. Much like a revetment, a root wad is going to need a stable base, a stable foundation, a footing, if you will. Much like a revetment needs a wide, stable base. And that we just don't have the room for. And if we were to put that in there, because of the ebb and flow, or ebb and flood tides, typically root wads are used in a single direction current, and they're anchored as such. This, you would have that back and forth. You'd also have problems potentially in the winter. Ice would come in, set on top of it, freeze, it would come up and literally could just pull it right out. So we didn't think that was a really best bet for a natural solution. I think what we've proposed is probably the best of both worlds. I don't know where Greg, he had commented in here that he thought the top of the bulkhead was below, or was above the top of the coastal bank, and by my reading of the plan, it's a good 1.5 feet below that. And we've done this before where we have put in a retaining structure, an erosion control, but above that, leaving the top of the bulkhead or the structure low enough that during storm events, material can be brought out. And that's by design. When that happens, we go back in and nourish, and even to that point, you know, Amy and I had talked about putting in a benchmark and seeing what nourishment is needed, using that benchmark as a signal that we need to nourish. But again, the bulkhead is 1.5 feet lower than the top of the coastal bank, so to allow for material to naturally come out of the bank as needed. A detailed monitoring and maintenance effort on top of nourishment would again protect not only the structure, it would protect the road and improve the whole area. Consistent with the riverfront regulations, as Amy had highlighted in our correspondence, we feel that the project will have, you know, no negative impact on public water supply groundwater or flood control. We do assert that it will indeed limit storm damage through the installation of the coastal engineering structure. It'll have no negative impact on land-containing shellfish. It will should improve wildlife habitat. We're going to be adding plant material both in upland and in intertidal areas. So what is now degraded will be improved. Improvement of fisheries. The plant material that we'll put in will be creating habitat, but it will also be limiting, because of the fibrous nature of the roots and the plants themselves, would be limiting sedimentation. We also assert too that there is no other practicable or substantially equivalent economic alternative to what we are proposing. The coastal engineering structure does fall within the limits of the riverfront regulations. Allowances for work in this area would allow 500 square feet, and we are significantly below that. We're at about 48 square feet, so roughly 50 square feet. We are, again, working to improve and enhance the capacity of the riverfront, improve groundwater and surface water, and our mitigation, consistent with riverfront regulations, is 4-to-1. So we're estimating that it's a 200 square foot vegetative plant installation that would be surrounding the bulkhead, both between the bulkhead and the platform, and both to the north and south, and a small area between the bulkhead to the west where the fencing is. And the plant material is listed here. So there.
Okay, thank you very much. Amy, do you have any comments on this?
Sure. So from the last time, really the two big questions were, is the coastal bank that would be behind this bulkhead a sediment source to a coastal beach? And does the proposed structure protect a pre-78 dwelling? Well, to answer the second one first, because it's easy, it's not protecting a pre-78 dwelling. Really, the definition of that is a pre-78 dwelling kind of has to be within about 40 feet of an eroding coastal bank with a certain erosion rate. So nobody's trying to make the argument here that that's the case. The bank behind the proposed bulkhead as a sediment source, there may be a tiny bit that it does contribute. But I think on the whole, and again, without doing a big sediment study, which would cost an awful lot of money and time, I don't think that would be a necessary thing to do. I don't think that this is a sediment source to a downdrift coastal beach. I actually did happen to get out there at a very, very low tide, because before I had been out there, I thought it was low enough, but it wasn't. But I did see the exposed coastal beach that's in the middle of the river there. I do think most of it is coming from other locations. That's just my thoughts on that. So for the past 15 years, this property has had a soft solution, be it the fiber roll array, which has an effect for the most part. Even if it was contributing, that would have prohibited a lot of the contribution, similar to what a bulkhead would have done. So, let's see. I guess I'll go back to the Rivers Act real quick. The Rivers Act really just states you can't have an increasing adverse impact as kind of redevelopment within an existing developed riverfront area. In my mind, routinely installing soft solutions such as fiber rolls here could actually be more damaging to the coastal bank and wetland resource areas than installing something that's a little bit more permanent that would need less maintenance, less disturbance over time. They're removing the sheeting and the navy piles, which is good because that decreases the footprint of the new structure a little bit. You mentioned doing nourishment. It's typically, if you're on a coastal bank that's on a true coastal beach, say on Nantucket Sound side, you have erosion rates. We know how much approximately how much erodes every year. We can calculate how many cubic yards the bank would naturally give. Here, we don't have that. It's too far upriver to have an erosion rate. So what I would recommend is if this goes forward, that you have a benchmark or two installed in the bulkhead. That way you can monitor the beach level, kind of, especially to the north, and nourish at a set amount as needed. As the soft solution was already permitted, I think the very least is to be able to put back a soft solution. And again, in my experience, the routine maintenance of something like that is actually more disruptive. The state of Massachusetts says that you cannot have a hard solution unless it's protecting a pre-78 dwelling. My recommendation to you is that this is it's less of an environmental standard and more of just a strict DEP standard. If DEP, I'm not trying to kick this down the line, but if DEP has an issue with this, a hard solution, not protecting a pre-78 dwelling, I would say let that play out at DEP's level. But in terms of the environmental detriment, I don't see any greater. I appreciated Greg's other options. I think he was giving broad stroke options, not necessarily saying that you should do something like root wads or whatnot in this area. He just, in general, these are some other options that are being applied, but he also acknowledged that this is a pretty high velocity area that gets deep very quick and may not be suitable for a situation such as this. So, I think with the additional plantings, that's also a benefit. It adds to the stability. So I would recommend approval of the project under the Act and bylaw with the installation of the benchmark, annual monitoring. Sand nourishment is needed.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Comments from the commissioners? Mark, you want to start?
I have no remarks.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I just have one question, which is about the high velocity and the potential scour, the scour that does happen there because of the current going around that corner there. And your sort of depth profile that you show on the plan shows the depth there. I think it's not really the depth, it's the elevation of the particular datum you're using. Like maybe 5 or 6 feet below zero.
Correct.
So, and you're saying that the sheep piles you're using are 20 feet? My question is just about whether those sheep piles are gonna be deep enough so that scour happening, going around that corner isn't, in the end, undermining the sheep piles. And it looks on the drawing like the bottom of the sheep piles doesn't go that deep, but they must be deeper than what's shown on the drawing because they're 20 feet long, right?
Correct.
What is the bottom elevation of the sheep pile? And specifically relative to the depth offshore there, and presumably you've taken into consideration the ongoing scour there and the potential for undermining the sheep pile.
We have, and to that point, it was pretty much through Anchor Marine had suggested the depth that was consistent with this kind of pile application. So I would have to defer back to them, as I'm not an engineer. It was their experience, and that was what we had originally bid out. So I don't know if that answers your question. I understand your concern, and it's below the existing grade of the river. I mean, the river bottom, I should say, at that location.
if I may, Lindsay,
Yeah?
on the profiles, profile AA, those, so it goes deeper than it actually shows, John? Those little squiggly lines that kind of go through the bottom, it
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
just
that's
means
the
that that's not the
ambiguity.
full length. So it's actually, I believe, gonna go deeper than that. That's also, it's almost like an approximation line. That these, they're gonna go in,
So it
well,
should go-
whatever's exposed, so if you have however many feet, what's it, about 5 feet exposed? Or not, exposed,
Just
but
on-
above mean high?
Right, it's
You're gonna
just-
have about 15 feet, so if this scale were to continue, you're going to about a minus 15 with where that bottom is gonna be. Those little
Yeah,
squiggly
right,
lines
right.
are meaning that it
That was
continues.
sort of the source of my question, because those two
It just means it continues deeper,
continues deeper than it shows.
correct.
Yeah, because this looks like only about 10 feet of
It's
the
gonna be about
piling.
15 feet
It's a
embedded.
20-foot piling.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, other than that question, I don't, this all seems reasonable to me. It seems like you guys have been very judicious and thoughtful about how you're trying to solve this problem, and it is a problem, clearly, so it all seems reasonable to me.
Okay, thanks, John.
I
Stan?
don't have any other questions.
Brad?
Yeah, I got a few thoughts and comments. To me, it's trickier than I think I'm hearing from others, just because, you know, it's a pretty sharp threshold to allow these coastal engineering structures to be used in these cases, and I feel like we don't have that definitive answer as to whether it is a sediment source, you know, coastal beach. So I feel a little bit uncertain about that. I wish we had, you know, the right person come in and just say, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. So that's a concern that I do have. Because, you know, these structures do cause impacts. There will be erosional impacts, probably on both upstream and downstream sides from, you know, increased energy hitting that edge, hitting the coastal bank. And so these things typically do cause, you know, downgradient erosion. Not always, but they often do. So I think it's, you know, it's something to think about. I guess I have a question going back to Berman's report. He mentions that an overwash bulkhead would not be considered a coastal engineering structure. Do you have thoughts on that, Amy? It seems to me that it would.
DP, he put that, we had a conversation about that. DP, I've seen him weigh both ways. I've seen them say it is a coastal engineering structure in some cases, and I've seen that they don't. So I think he erred on the side of caution, or he,
Yeah.
and said, or not erred on the side of caution. Did he say it was or wasn't?
He kind of implies that it would be a non-CES alternative. And so
I think more often than not it is. It is a coastal engineering structure.
I would view it as one.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't one, then I think it would be an easier permitting load to say, you know, yes, you could put one of those in. But I also think that would probably have as many concerns as the proposed bulkhead.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Again, an overwash bulkhead, not regardless, but regardless of the nomenclature, is just not gonna work there because of the increased impact that will have to the areas that are unprotected above it.
Right.
And again, he mentions using a coir envelope. It just is not gonna last. It's in that intertidal area, it's always gonna
Right.
be wet and dry and wet and dry. It's gonna degrade much quicker than if it was either completely submerged or at that above mean high water. So I think that's the issue that we have, is any temporary structure, and we did a temporary structure, and we got some pretty good mileage out of it, but again, to do that again and again, not only, as Amy had alluded to, there's gonna be a greater impact, but there's also the significant cost to that. You know, materials have not gotten any less expensive. And we wanna do this one and done with, and then speaking to your concern about the sediment source, again, when we put that in, there was no sediment coming out of that bank at all. And even to that point now, there's very limited, with the geotextiles still in some fashion or form holding the soil, holding the sediment behind where the fiber rolls are, there's very little, if any, sediment coming out of there. And for the past, since 2007. So that upstream or downdrift coastal beach has kind of arrived, you know, without any impact of sediment coming out of the fiber roll array that we've used previously. And then, to your point, if there is sediment, again, because it's deep there, the tide runs quickly, more often, gravity is gonna pull it to the bottom and move it. It's not moving upriver as much as it is downstream at all, and there is no downstream coastal beach.
Yeah, I agree with the overwash bulkhead. I don't think that it would be an advantage to what you're proposing. We recently permitted one on the west side of Witchmere Harbor, and it's real easy to see that above it, the overwash has caused an erosion of salt marsh. And so that's an impact that was anticipated, or at least it was a concern, and I think it would probably be the same thing here.
Well, and two, an overwash bulkhead, just like a fiber roll project, is great in the right location, you know, and I just don't think an overwash bulkhead, given the ebb and flow of the current and the long fetch to the north, is gonna give us any, there's no real benefit from a ecological standpoint, and really from a timeline standpoint. You're still gonna have the same impact. It basically just draws the proverbial line in the sand and limits the toe erosion to a certain point. And that's all you're gonna get out of that, in this location.
Yeah. And I agree the alternatives would be short-lived. I don't think they're really good ideas for this location, so. Yeah, I remain concerned about these structures. I think they do cause erosional impacts, but this location did try the soft solution, as we requested. And the one thing that doesn't seem to be regulatory is protecting the road. It doesn't seem like there's any reason for us to be concerned about it, yet it seems to be a good reason to want to have some protection for this site. But I guess it really doesn't weigh into our decision-making, but that was something I thought about initially.
And to your concern about, you know, the transfer of energy, I agree. When I was on this commission, we were always concerned about what was gonna happen on adjacent properties. Everything's contained on this property. At the same time, we're utilizing fiber rolls in the right application at the ends to limit flanking and end scour. And we have a robust monitoring and maintenance program plan in the work. So it would have to be significant deleterious effects and somebody not maintaining it for this to have impacts, which are consistent with bulkheads, I understand. But the way it's designed, not only do the ends go landward, we bury those, and then we face those and come around the ends of those with the fiber rolls that do absorb wave energy and do offer some protection. And somebody's gonna be there on a regular basis to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. It's a vested interest for the client and obviously ultimately for the town, regardless of.
Yep, thank you. I think, yeah, it's a site that does lend itself toward what you're proposing. I guess I would want to see some pretty detailed monitoring requirements so that we can learn from this and see what happens on those boundaries over time. That's all, thanks.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, I really have no questions, but I could support Amy's recommendation.
Thank you. Al?
No comment. I think it's a good plan you have, and good luck with it.
I have a couple of questions. So once we approve this, then the DEP will still need to sign off on it, is that right?
So when DEP reviews a project, they do initial review, they issue a number. When they're doing their initial review, they call out certain things. So on the DEP website, they had mentioned about this being a coastal bank and maybe not, whether or not, they were asking what pre-78 structure it was protecting. So what happens is when we issue the permit, it will go to DEP. If they are looking, when they look at it, they may question it. So, and that's just a risk that would be run. DEP would have, so when we approve, it's under the act and the bylaw, so DEP has the ability to appeal it or supersede it under the act, but if they choose to.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. Amy, in the time that we've been working on this particular area, what's your experience with that, with the bar across the river from here? Has it been accreting, or?
I do believe, yes, that it is accreting. The salt marsh accretes in a triangular formation. And the exposed little island that comes up that you can see only at the real low tides, I can't say volume-wise how much that's changed. But just in my 10 years here, and a lot of people have a lot more time here, but I mean, I've known this section of the river. Actually, the Doyles were one of the first people that I think I met 10 years ago when I started this job. That finger that extends out has substantially accreted. While this side of the river, it is slightly eroding, but I don't think it's eroding as fast as that other side's accreting. So I don't know if the river's narrowing at that point,
Yeah.
but certainly, I mean, the velocity's higher. That finger is getting bigger. And, I mean, they've lived across the river, so they could attest to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, just going back, I remember my natural history lessons in school, that a horseshoe bend like this eventually will straighten itself out. The river's natural proclivity is to go straight rather than go around a curve like this, so in time, I was just wondering how quickly that might be happening here.
I don't think we're at that turning point yet, but you can see that the marsh is low enough there, adjacent to the coastal bank. I mean, in a big tide, it overtops all of that.
Yeah.
So it just looks clear. So it may.
Yeah.
And you're
eventually.
correct, over time, typically they do that.
Yeah, okay,
If they can't push any more to one side, they will go straight.
right.
That piece there is growing.
Yeah, see, I figured that this would disappear completely and you'd have just a straight river.
Yeah.
And then this little
Yeah.
horseshoe bend
Bigger or
turns into
smaller?
like a little pond or swamp or
Yeah.
something like that over
Really?
time.
I can't tell you what that's done, but I've been boating there for a
Could be
long time.
depending on when
It's
the
hard to
tide
say, but
was,
I know
too.
that one's increasing because you can hit that with your truck at
Oh,
low
really?
tides,
And
yeah.
I was
Oh,
thinking in the
okay.
past 20 years or something. Not in 30.
Lindsay, a couple more questions for you.
Cool.
So you do have a comment in here that they'll be driven to the full depth, the sheet piles, with minimum cutoff.
So maybe it's already working,
And
maybe it's already
your expectation is you'll be able to get most of that 20 feet down.
Correct.
Okay, good. Then you also have a comment in here about a jute lift directly in front of the bulkhead. Can you describe that for me? I'm not familiar with a jute lift
So
necessarily.
it's pretty much identical to what we did initially. In an effort to retain the existing created salt marsh in that front area that you can see is still growing, we're gonna put a fiber roll in, basically tuck a couple layers of the coir, 1,000-gram coir mat under it, flop it over. Wherever it's needed, we get to the, fill to the appropriate elevation, put that back, tuck that in, stake it, and then plant it. That alterniflora grows at a relatively narrow window. If the angle of repose is shallow, it grows great distances, like in Cape Cod Bay, up in Eastham and Wellfleet, you have these nice, beautiful areas. But where it's steeper, that area narrows. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. And the idea initially was to help buffer some of the energy from the river against the soft solution that was there. We're just keeping that detail in here to do basically the same thing. We don't necessarily need it to protect the bulkhead,
Right.
but we're trying to retain that as long as we can for basically ecological function.
So you put in the koi roll, and then you'll have this matting, basically.
Correct.
And then you'll put more soil on top of that and
No, all
replant
this-
it?
all the matrix, I'll call it, the planting matrix goes between the fiber roll and the bulkhead. Then you take that matting and you flop it back over, and it's just like a skin graft. You put it back over and then you attach it.
Okay. And
And
how
then
do and the plants will come up through the matting?
Correct.
Okay. So you have to replant that area then?
We're going to enhance, there's already plants there, and if this occurs, if we get our permit and all things are equal, we can plant right over what's there, we can cover everything back up, and then it will come right through the matting,
Okay.
in
Yeah.
addition to plant material that we're gonna bring in and install in that area.
Yeah, I'd love to see the before and after with that as part of the monitoring plan too, Amy. You know, so
I
that we
take
can.
significant pictures, and as Amy knows, I'm pretty diligent on monitoring and maintenance protocol.
Yep.
Typically, we'll do a report on or around November 1st, and then we monitor regularly, even monthly, and then after significant weather events, storms, we'll take pictures, and if obviously something needs to be done, we get in touch with Amy, we'd let her know what we're gonna do, and we fix it.
Okay, good. And then the last question that I had for you was, under item 13 in your construction notes, it said that the planted area on the riverside of the bulkhead shall be maintained only if reasonably practicable. And I didn't know, I mean, that's sort of vague.
So, again, we have fiber rolls. They're a temporary structure. If you go out there now, you can see the stakes that held the initial fiber rolls. Those stakes are still there.
Right, we saw those, yeah,
But the fiber rolls are gone.
yeah.
The same thing is gonna happen. The fiber roll is going to degrade at some point, and the idea is to hopefully let it degrade slow enough that the plants take up that soil holding characteristic. And to some extent, that's actually what has happened down there. You'll see that the fiber rolls are gone, and you have plant material right up to the edge of where the fiber roll was. So you had some accretion, you had some, plants will harvest sediment out of the water column. The suspended sediment in the water column will drop down, help create the matrix, and hopefully create a substrate that they can grow in. And that's kind of the whole idea about soft solutions, is you try to use plant material that's gonna grow fast enough, or at the same rate that, or faster than the temporary coir material degrades. And that's
Okay.
exactly what we're gonna do.
So it'll replace it.
Correct.
Good, well, that's helpful then. And, I mean, if that's not happening, what's the alternative?
If it's not happening, if that erodes faster, then we can plant it. We would let it go. We would remove the material that's there and try and manage the shoulder sections that would potentially have more impact.
All right.
So as that thread of the channel moves further to the west, it gets deeper, closer to the bulkhead,
Right,
which is probably likely, but we're gonna go as long as we can to continue to maintain this in a structure that we've outlined.
so in time, then, the bulkhead will be the only protection then?
That would be
For
the
that area.
anticipation, correct?
Yeah, okay. All right. With that, I have no other questions. Any comments from the audience on this? No? So can we have a motion on this?
I would move for approval of the notice of intent, 48 North Road.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second?
Little discussion?
Little discussion, please.
So, in terms of monitoring, just wanted to talk this over a little bit and flesh it out. You've got some ideas, I think. In terms of benchmarks, Amy, are you thinking of where are you thinking of putting benchmarks?
North and south, on either end of the bulkhead,
Yeah,
just to monitor levels on either end.
and have them associated with the vegetated edge of the bank or in a little bit?
I would say.
I
On the
wouldn't
north
mind-
side, you have a little beachy area. I was gonna go by elevation.
Mm-hmm.
Have it, basically that this is your baseline that you have out here now.
Mm-hmm.
So use this as your baseline for elevations. If your elevations, and obviously if there's scarp on either side, by shooting, you'd be able to tell pretty readily if the elevation's changing.
Yep. Can I request a near field and a far field benchmark? So that would mean instead of 1 above and below, 2 at a certain distance above and below, and have at least 1 above and below associated with the salt marsh. And any thoughts on that? Just, it's a pretty valuable opportunity to see what happens when we put one of these CESs on a bank like this, where you've got pretty high tidal velocities.
When you say near field and far field, do you want to quantify that?
Well, where were you thinking of, one up and down, right at the edge of the fiber rolls, or a little bit off? I would think close to the edge of the 2 fiber rolls, and then, some distance beyond that. Any thoughts on what would be a reasonable far field distance?
Well, explain to me, please, your far field definition. Are you looking someplace landward, someplace far field on the property?
Right.
Adjacent to it?
Yeah, I don't even know if I should call it far field, just a second point that helps us know if we had erosion occurring from the structure that
Or
alters
accretion,
habitat.
for that matter, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
I
any
mean-
alterations in elevation, sediment, plants. So it makes sense to have, 2 close to the edges, and then, I'm not
Good,
sure,
okay.
25 feet? It doesn't have to be that far.
Closer to the road.
Okay.
Or are you referring that little beachy area, as you call it, to the north?
Not beach, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, the sandy area.
Yeah.
That's the HCT property, right?
No,
before
this is
that.
still theirs.
There's a stump, the old locust stump.
Yeah.
Just about on the property line.
Yep.
And I might suggest one there, because that's close to that other area,
Mm-hmm.
and we could just see how that changes over time.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
That's simple.
Yep. And I'm fine with you guys going back and forth to narrow
Okay,
down in the
yeah.
field what makes sense.
Well, I think I understand what you're looking for, and I agree, it's an opportunity to gather some empirical data on not only the river, but how it's impacted by a structure.
Right, thank you for that. And then the period, Amy, would you go for 3 years of annual reporting, or what would the period be for monitoring?
3 years of annual, but I would even go farther, with a certificate of compliance, it's kind of unusual to permit us a hard solution where we don't have a pre-78 dwelling. So I would say make it an ongoing condition for a certificate of compliance is annual monitoring,
That's fine, but
which
we're
they're
gonna,
gonna be doing anyways, I'm
we're-
sure,
yeah,
but.
we're gonna be there, there anyway. And, certainly with the certificate of compliance, we're gonna request ongoing conditions to manage, monitor. So that's very consistent with what we wanna do anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I agree, it's unusual, but I still think it's probably the best solution for this very specific site. But I'll be curious to see if DEP
Yeah.
decides to supersede this. Other structures on beaches, in Chatham, they have, in other towns, they have stepped in. So this will be
Well,
interesting.
They stepped in on ours.
Yeah, yeah.
But then they allowed another one in town, so
Right. Yeah, Red River Beach.
see what happens.
That was one where we, I think, thought it was the right solution, and DP stepped in, so this will be interesting. All right, thank you for that on the monitoring plan.
Any other comments, discussions? Okay, so we have a motion on the table. All in favor? Oh, it's been seconded?
Aye.
Seconded?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is another notice of intent for 10 Captain Scott Road, Again, it's a follow-up presentation to our last meeting.
Evening. For the record, I'm John O'Reilly, and Michelle, the owner, is here. I think Gary, her husband, is on the line as well. We were here 2 weeks ago now. The commission had several questions and concerns, and we've revised the plan, and in that revision, we did meet with Amy on site to review some of the mitigation components of this, as well as some of the activities that were highlighted at our last meeting. So I think I'll start with the dock. We went back and forth with Gary and Michelle, and they have tried to meet you somewhere in the middle. We have slid the dock to the east approximately 6 feet to get it to meet the 51 feet from the property line. And we have not reduced the length, but we did reduce the landing at the end of the dock. And there was some discussion on that, even though I still feel the dock was designed in accordance to the policy. We removed one of the sections which reduced the number of pads that are on the bottom by 4, which is basically almost a 20% reduction or 15% reduction in pads. So, which would equate to pulling the structure back the 8 feet or 10 feet or a section worth. So we're trying to lessen the mass of the structure, but again, the owners are very concerned about the depth, want the boat lift out where it's proposed, and would really hope the commission understands their request and supports it. With regards to moving the dock an additional 25, 30 feet to the east to put it somewhere just adjacent to where the canoe and kayak rack is, you know, we walked the beach with Amy, and Michelle was very forthright in why they're concerned with, you know, putting the dock further east. And, you know, this is a very busy beach. And, you know, in the larger beach directly in front of the house, there's swimmers and sunbathers and so forth. And then adjacent to that area, you have the kayak use. And, you know, their thinking was putting the dock as far west as possible to provide, that would be almost the end of their activity on the beach, the dock and the boating activities on the west side. So if they feel that if we need to push the dock further to the east, it's gonna push the kayak use west, which may lead to the same concerns that the commission has about the beach and the activity. So, you know, we hope the commission views that request, and Michelle can certainly answer any further questions the commission has. But that's kind of where our thought process is in relationship to the dock location. So enough of that. And then with regards to the mitigation, we did address some of the improvements that were done to the property over the years, and we are addressing the mitigation as was discussed. We're looking at 2 areas, one adjacent to the woodlands out by the raised vegetable garden behind the garage, as to get rid of some of the lawn in there and replace it with shrubbery. And then if you looked at the bank or the slope that's out there adjacent to the deck, there is some open areas that could use some more planting, so we're taking advantage of that as well. With regards to the 3 or cluster of oak trees down by the kayak rack, we are gonna end up, we're asking to keep one. It's about 5 inches, 5-6 inches. It is a stunted oak, but it does provide some shade, and it's actually growing horizontally, if you will. So we'd like to keep that, but the other 2, the cluster next to it, as well as the one adjacent to the shed, we would be looking to flush cut those and then manage them as shrubbery, so keeping them in shrub size and go that route. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We did hear back from Natural Heritage, and their review was positive. I do have the coverage calculations and the planting notes, so at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and certainly Michelle is here to add to the conversation if you want.
Thanks, John. Amy, can we have your comments, please?
Sure. We'll start on the landward side. When you add up things like the patio, the garden bed, generator pad, tanks, propane tanks, when you add all that square footage up, which is all in the 50 to 100, you get just shy of 500 square feet. So double the mitigation would be what we would have required. When we met on the site, I had suggested some plantings pretty much on the slope, which is almost at the 50-foot buffer, right about straddling the 50-foot buffer zone line, because that slope has mostly herbaceous, grasses and whatnot, but adding a little bit of diversity in there would help with some habitat and whatnot. So they did that at my suggestion. And then the other area was an area they had already been thinking of, is kind of by the garden bed area. That's the existing edge of vegetation line there. So it's, they're going landward of the existing edge of vegetation and creating a thicker buffer to the pond there. And I think the plantings that they are proposing for these areas are appropriate for these areas. And then, of course, the condition that we have within the 100-foot buffer is pretty standard. It's standard for everybody, is the no chemical treatment, no fertilization. I think that will improve things as well. So with the I think the mitigation covers the additional bit of hardscape that has been done over the years. The canoe and kayak rack, it's kind of it's a sandy area, a little bit of grass underneath, but not much. I don't see a hazard with keeping it where it is. There's the one oak tree to remain in that patch. That actually hasn't been touched. It's been growing more laterally out over towards the water than up, so has not been pruned. The others, cluster has been extensively pruned over the years to the point where I think the best bet is to flush cut it and let it come back into more of a shrub. And maintain it as such. It can actually be a viable adult species if maintained correctly and not just kind of topped at the very top every year. And then the length of the dock, so I guess my suggestion is that the length of the dock is okay as is. There's no vegetation underneath that it's going to be shading out. There's more depth than you need, which is in this situation, because there's not vegetation and things that it's harming, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I would be in favor of letting them keep the same length that they have. I still have the concerns of the location where it's proposed. I know it has not been done recently, but there has been there was trimming many years ago of vegetation that probably extended out onto that little bit of a beach area and between where the dock is and the vegetated wetland. The edge of, somewhere between the edge of pond and your edge of vegetation, I noticed on site, it seems like when we had a storm, the water, there was a bit of a lip where you had a tiny bit of, not erosion, but a change in grade there, indicating that sometime fairly recently, water had come up to that level, be it maybe not stayed there, but be it at a storm event. So I'm in an extreme high year. I know, Michelle, you said it's never come up that high, but I do have concerns that increased activity in that area will increase the disturbance there. And seeing as how you do have a very extensive beach area, moving the dock to the east, so it's just clear of that edge of vegetation. I would say recommend that to the commission as having much less impact, and while still having a lot of beach area to the east for beach activities. So trying to consolidate, if we will, activities on the beach. So I would recommend approval with the one condition that the dock needs to be moved about another 25 feet to the east to prevent future encroachment. I don't know if you want, looks like Michelle might want to respond to that, so I don't know if you want to do that before the commission or after Ernie.
You tell me.
Well, that's the chairman's.
That's fine, there's no set protocol, if you'd like to, sure.
Okay. So you want to move it from where John has it,
I drew it on a plan for you,
25 feet, and that's,
John.
Yeah, that's what I have here.
where's the shed?
That's the shed.
So it's still to the,
It would be to the right of
So for the commission's edification,
looking at the water.
I put the sheds here,
Okay.
just clear of the edge of vegetation here is where I suggested, it's about 25 feet.
So you're saying move it 25 feet from where John has it?
Yes.
More left,
to
more
the-
west.
No,
East.
East,
From where John has it, 25 feet more?
To the right, if you're looking at the water, to the
East.
right.
toward the
Okay.
main area of the beach.
Okay. If I can just give you the reasons, the logical reasons from my point of view, having used this beach for 32 years. If the dock is where the board is suggesting it, okay? When we put the kayaks and paddle boards in, we will now put them to the west of the dock. So, because we'll leave the play area, the running around area for the kids, we'll leave that without kayaks and paddle boards on that beach. So you got the dock, we'll put the kayaks over on this area. So after we use the kayaks, the adults, the kids, the teenagers use the kayaks, we'll be pulling them up towards the beach. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if we're pulling them up towards the beach, then the kids, the adults, friends, family, walking to the kayaks will now be walking more on that area than they would be if the dock were over here. Because if the dock were here, and we could use the kayaks here, then the kids, the adults, everybody would be walking, getting the kayaks and going out. And they still have all the beach to play with. If we put the dock, if we move the dock here. If we move the dock over here, then the kayaks rack is here. We'll be putting the kayaks and the paddle boards over here, which means that everybody getting a paddle board and a kayak would now walk behind the dock over to that side. And it would get more use versus just using the dock. Because use the dock, you come, you get on the dock, you go out. You don't go into the vegetation area and the rest of the beach to the west. Does that make sense?
I guess what I would say is,
I had a picture.
you have
I can picture
about 80 feet wide of beach area. Even if you move the dock 25 feet over to the east, you still have, I don't understand the need to launch to say that you're gonna launch your kayaks over there when you still have, you have about 80 feet wide. You have a huge area.
Well, we are blessed. You know,
So,
we are, without a doubt,
actually-
we are
I mean-
blessed and lucky.
if a person who didn't have,
I think what's trying to,
Yeah.
be
Yeah, that's where the lift is, yeah.
I'm sorry, through the chair. I think what the concern is that by pushing the dock into the middle of the property, that the activity that currently goes on at the beach would segment with bathing on one side of the dock and paddleboard and kayak on the other side of the dock, which kind of flies in the face of what you're trying to protect. And I think the rationale is if we leave the dock at 51 feet off the property line, that would be the end of activity on that particular stretch of beach. So you actually are protecting more beach than currently is being protected now. What the concern is, and this was what Gary and Michelle talked about with me, is that if we move the dock center of the lot, they feel that the activity will spread to both sides of the dock and may short-circuit the intent of trying to protect that area. So that's kind of why, I mean, if it was up to them, they thought, when we started this project, that they were dealing with a 25-foot setback. So the dock has already moved over east more than they thought was going to require. And you have a 50-foot setback, and we're complying with that. I think that's the rationale that Michelle and Gary are coming from, as far as, you know, everyone looks at that beach and says, wow, you got a great big beach, but they have operated that beach and used that beach, and they just feel that that's probably going to be what's going to happen by moving the dock to the center of the lot.
You know, basically in our 32 years on this beautiful property, the water has never come up to the vegetation to stay. It has come up in a heavy storm and gone back, come up and gone back, but it has never stayed. So, the fact that that has never happened, I don't see it happening, but who knows, the future. And we have done everything we can to protect and enjoy and enhance the property and the beach. We're not gonna do anything that will definitely cause harm. To that end, we will do as the board asks, of course, because we're all in this together.
Good. All right, thank you very much. Mark, do you have any comments?
I do not.
Ready. John?
I have a couple questions. One is, just for information, clearly an important part of what you want to do is support your boat lift. So my question is one of the reasons you want the depth that you're asking for, is that specifically a requirement to accommodate the boat lift?
I would say yes.
I mean, if you only had 3 feet of water there, could you have the boat lift at the end of the dock in 3 feet of water?
It could not operate the way it's supposed to.
All right, that was the question. Okay, so, I just have a question for you, Amy, is whether you're aware of historical records of water levels in Long Pond? Is anybody keeping track of how the level of the water in Long Pond varies
You
year
don't
to
know.
year?
I'm not aware of any staff gauges.
There's a flume there underneath the railroad tracks on the, Route 124.
Yeah, there's
If
a
that water
flume.
has raised at any time, that would wash over 124 at the beach by the railroad, by the bicycle path. So I've never seen it rise. It can be controlled by the boards in the river.
I mean, Heinz would be the one who, if he might have something on, but I don't know.
No,
The level is set by the boards, though, so when the boards don't change, is that basically the
They
way
can
it goes?
change.
yeah, the boards are set by Heinz mainly for the river herring migration in the spring and fall. And we've talked for a long time about putting a staff gauge there, and we just haven't done it. We should, but as far as I know, there is no pond level staff gauge in Long
Well,
Pond.
unless
Just-
Brewster had it, but we don't.
No, I've talked to Chris Miller,
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
there's nothing on Long Pond that I know of.
yeah.
So, just not to get too bogged down on that point, but from to your knowledge, does the water level vary at all from one end of the pond to the other? Is it basically, if you have a gauge one place, that's the level of the pond everywhere?
It's
I
good.
mean, of course, if the wind's blowing in one direction, another thing's gonna change a little.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would think a pond of this size, you wouldn't have a lot of variation.
I don't think you'd be able to pick it up in a gauge.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's maybe an inch or something.
It's very minimal, I'm sure.
So, another question I have about this in particular is, what you're proposing is to maintain oaks as shrubs, which just bends my head a little. I mean, is there, just taken for what it is there any reason why you would prefer some other shrub to an oak maintained as a shrub? I mean, is the health of the oak going to be at risk by constantly topping it? I mean, it's sort of completely in contradiction to the general requirements, which is you don't top trees, you
Yep.
you bottom prune them, but
So maintain, like, how it's been done is, the topping of the trees such as this has been found, in studies to be detrimental to the health of the tree. It's not proper pruning, the proper pruning practices haven't been done. It does open the tree up potentially to diseases, and the trees don't reach their full maturity. They actually can reach maturity as a mature shrub, believe it or not, if properly maintained. So if you continue to top where they are now, they're pretty leggy, and then they only have a little bit at the top, and then you continue to top, it stays like that. When you maintain it as a shrub, and the other option is to remove them and plant actual shrub planting, which I think we talked about, and it mean not desirable, but if push came to shove type thing, would be an option. So, in speaking with groups who do this much more often than I have to do it, you know, Wilkinson and Crawford and Blue Flax, you can have a viable shrub oak and maintain it as such, and it's not considered topping at that point, really. When you flush cut and then maintain it as a shrub. What is being done now is the definition of topping. I know that's still a little unclear.
So what you're saying is that, at a minimum, what should be done is a different maintenance
Is a different,
regime on
Correct.
the existing oaks that are there.
correct.
They should be pruned in a particular way in order to keep them as a healthy shrub.
Correct.
Our reservation of removing them is to remove and get rid of that root mass that currently exists there. So
So-
that's why we would like to flush cut them and manage them back as a shrub.
Is it a binary choice? You either manage them as a shrub or you pull the roots out? Can you transition, plant other shrubs? And I'm not,
Well, if you just flush cut it and leave it, it's gonna grow back. So, I mean,
okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well, but you're not concerned, Amy, you are not concerned about having oaks there managed as a shrub, holding the bank together, is that correct?
in this particular instance, I don't see the issue there for this little grouping.
Okay, on to the next question, which is, your description of your use of the beach is, I think I understood it, but I'm not 100% sure. And, I mean, I don't think anybody would agree that you can store kayaks on the beach. And I don't think you were suggesting that that was why there would be a problem if we asked you to move the dock east. It's not because you thought there would be more use because the kayaks were stored on the beach, is that correct?
No, that's not what was intended.
So
I don't mean storing them on the beach. I mean, if we were to use them in the morning, go have lunch, we're gonna leave them on the beach. And then somebody else later in the afternoon might go and say, I'm gonna jump in the kayaks and go out for a kayak ride. They would then use the kayaks. At the end of the day, the kayaks are all packed up and put on the rack. They're not left on the beach, no.
Okay, well, my only comment about that is, John, you were characterizing the request that was being made to move the thing east as putting it in the center of the property, and that's just looking at the plan here, it's clearly, nobody's asking you to put it in the center of the property. Moving it 25 feet is not putting it in the center of the property, it's putting it on the edge of where the existing shrub line is there on the shore. So I'm still in favor of that. I agree with what Amy's saying. And you have a very large beach there, and I don't think moving the dock feet. It doesn't seem to me like that should interfere in any great way or cause you to create further degradation to the west of the dock. But that's my take on the situation. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Stanley?
We're focusing on, did you have a dock prior to this?
When we bought the property in 35 years ago, there was an old dilapidated dock.
No, but I mean, have you had a dock up to this point?
Yes, I'm not going to lie, it was
So physically, where was that on the beach?
it was near the neighbors,
I mean,
Further west.
further west.
further west. Okay, so you're still staying to the west, okay.
I just said, we're going legal.
No, that's okay. I was just wondering if there had been something on the east side of the property. But again, I have a real tough time trying to understand the rationale of the kayaks, because again, when I look 25 feet, like what John was saying, you still have, from what I can tell from the drawing, a lot of room in front that the dock doesn't have any interference with people trying to launch kayaks. Secondly, if you're gonna start launching from the west, I wouldn't be doing that because that's where your boat is gonna be, on the west side of the dock. And why would you be going near your boat and launching kayaks when you got a power boat in that area? At least I wouldn't.
Can I respond to that?
Pardon?
Am I supposed to respond to that? I'll just tell you why, it's because there would be other kids running around and playing, and we just wouldn't want them to run and bump and trip on the kayaks. That's the only reason. No reason otherwise.
Trying to think, I had another thought there. Oh, and so that's my rationale. To me, it looks like you have a lot of room over there. I mean, even that doesn't, I don't understand, because, I mean, if you leave the dock where John has the drawing here, your kayaks are gonna be launching where they are now. So, under that comment, that would be in the way of kids running around. And my only other comment is, definitely want to stress the condition that we're going to put on this, that the off-site storage in the winter for that boat lift and everything will be out of the 50.
Mhm.
That's all I want to say.
Brad?
Nope, nothing further. Appreciate the modifications from the last hearing, and I do agree with Amy's analysis on where to put the dock and the comments we just heard.
Jim?
Okay, I also agree with Amy's analysis with regard to the location of the dock, and that it should be moved, whether it's about 25 or 26 feet to the east. And especially with the large size of that beach, and I'm assuming this is a private beach. Your rationale for leaving it where it is according to this plan raises another very serious concern to me with regard to how you're using the kayaks. Now, I don't know if there's any way we can control that, but your explanation of the rationale for that location raises even more concern to me.
Okay.
Alan?
No comment.
Couple of questions that I had. John, to your point about the depth of the boat lift, we had a dock on Sequattam Road that had a boat lift with it
Correct.
as well.
Mhm.
And my recollection is that that dock, the depth at the end of the dock was around 4 feet,
I think it's 4.5-ish, yeah.
4.5 or so.
Yeah, you're right, between 4
Unless
and
this
5.
is a unique
It
boat lift
actually
or
was,
something.
I think, another of John's projects.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
And so that was similar boat lift? I mean, it seemed the same size,
I
if
don't
I
think it
remember.
was a similar boat lift, but there was a boat lift.
Yeah, okay, if I recollect the size, it was very close to what we saw at this property.
This one's bigger,
This is a bigger lift?
yeah.
Okay.
I think so, anyway.
So
from what I
anyhow,
recall.
that's to your point, John, your question anyhow. the tree that's going to remain on the beach, the oak tree that's there now, has that been topped?
No, it's really, it like grew up and then out, straight out,
Do you know
no
the ad,
topping.
do you know the ad for Aruba where the trees grow sideways?
Yeah.
It looks similar to that.
It's very,
Okay.
it-
So it hadn't been touched, basically, and it
Oh.
won't be going
It
forward. then.
certainly has not been touched the way the others have been touched.
Okay, good. I didn't remember it, and that was a little question from my head. On the plan, at the east end of the beach, just before the property line, there's a little blip there, and it wasn't on the original plan.
The, when we went out there, Amy, I noticed that there's a little bit of a stone groin at the
Oh.
point,
Okay,
and that's what that's supposed to represent.
all right. Any reason for that, do you know?
Why I added it, or why
No,
it's
why is
there?
it there?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm assuming that it's been there forever.
Yeah, okay.
it's been there quite a long time.
All
Falling
right.
apart.
It actually designates where the shore then, once you travel east, comes way back in, and then down, continues on south. You
Yeah.
can see it on, we've added this component of the wetland here.
Mhm.
You can see that this is the point, and the wetland comes way back, the pond
Right.
comes way back in.
Oh, okay. So with respect to storage, this is a huge dock, probably one of the largest ones we've permitted in a long time. You've got a tremendous slope going up to the property, to the grass area. How do you plan on getting the docks off of this beach in the off-season?
Man labor, I don't know. I haven't, it's gonna have to be man
And the
labor.
boat lift, too.
Pardon?
And the boat lift, too.
The boat lift, I have no, I can't answer to that one yet. I mean, it's going to have to be, I guess, disassembled and brought up. I don't know. You know,
Okay.
unfortunately, I think it's going to be very difficult to do that, but if that's what the commission says,
Yeah.
then that's what will happen.
Because as I thought about this, I mean, you have essentially a completely sand beach down there. And my concern is that we force you into a position where you're basically causing impact of something to the slope, trying to bring this dock up outside of the 50 for storage every year.
I
And then in the spring, bringing it back down that slope. I'm just wondering if any of the other commissioners would share my feelings that this might be one of those situations where we would allow them to leave it down on the sand part of the beach in the off-season. Do you have any thoughts on that, Amy?
I just would urge you to stay consistent with your rules for people. We have a lot of people watching and, what's happening on Long Pond and in other areas, so I just would urge consistency. And if it can't be carried up, then potentially it could be floated. I know that it's a cost, but floated to the public landing and hauled off that way if there was concern for that. So there is a set staircase, concrete staircase there to, if they were to go up and down, but I wouldn't deter from, I understand what you're saying, that impact might be minimal, but we haven't allowed it. So, one, for consistency, and also I think there's other means to get it off than carrying up the slope,
Can it be
Okay.
left in the water?
seasonal. We don't permit year-round.
November 15th is our deadline.
Well, the bill lift will either need to be dismantled or floated off. I think it's probably gonna be floated off to a flatbed and then trailer it over to the house and drop next to the garage.
Is it that heavy?
Yes.
Oh, have you seen it? It's a
no.
monster. I
The
mean,
boat
it's,
lift itself is
Oh, the boat lift.
enormous,
boat lift
yeah.
is a monster. Now, the dock, one or two individuals can,
Pick it up.
I mean, it's meant to come apart, meant to be carried up,
Right.
carried down. So, I mean, I'm not gonna do it, so, but it is, it is doable. It's the boat lift that's gonna need to be either dismantled or floated over to the town landing and then trailered back to the house.
Yeah, okay. All right, just a thought. Any other comments on
Sure.
that? Anybody?
Can I ask a question, since
Sure.
you were so kind to bring that point up?
Mhm.
Technically, the boat lift is not part of the dock, correct? It's a freestanding,
It's a
Wouldn't
water, it's a water-dependent structure. which is that, so I would consider it a water-dependent structure per our, and it's also, I mean, it's a structure in the wetland.
Okay,
Yeah, we've never treated it differently than we would require the dock be treated.
okay, because I just thought the moorings are left in the water.
Those don't require conservation permit, though.
No.
That's strictly through the harbor master.
Does the boat ramp require conservation?
They pull
The boat
most of them.
requires?
Yes.
The other question that I have, comment, with respect to moving the dock, just looking at your scale here, I would judge you've got at least 100 feet of beach, even if you move the dock over 25 feet. That's a lot of beach. No matter how many kayaks and kids you got running
Yeah.
around, it's a lot of beach, and I don't see your argument necessarily as being a valid nor a hardship. But more importantly, when we were out there doing the site visit and we were standing on the beach in front of the vegetation that's there next to the shed, between the shed and the water, I could see signs that it had been pruned. I mean, it was just obvious that it had been pruned. So somebody has done it in order to maintain that corridor. And, I don't think, by leaving the dock where it is, I think we're promoting that kind of treatment of the shrubbery that's been going on evidently for some period of time to try to keep it pruned back from the beach, from the sand area. And, I'm not in favor of leaving the dock there because of that activity and because I think it will continue to exist. So, from my perspective, I think Amy's recommendation to move the dock is a valid one. Any other comments? Comments from the audience? You said your husband's on. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, he's been texting me as I needed.
Oh.
We're good.
Okay.
He said, just accept what they say and happy.
I like his attitude. All right, can we
if-
have a,
So
I'm sorry.
I'd be willing to revise the plan, to shift it to the area just to the east. And
Okay, so we would want to have that revised plan.
Yeah, I think if that's the only change that you want to see, and I think it seems like we're in agreement, then I would say that you can approve tonight, and then within the week, get us a revised plan, so when we do the orders of conditions at the next meeting, which is not a public hearing, we have that plan prior to that. But if that's the only change, I don't think they need a continuance.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question, and it goes back to the concern that I had mentioned earlier. Clearly, I'm in favor of revising the plan to move the dock, whether it's 25, 26 feet or whatever, to the east. But can we, in the order of conditions, make a stipulation that the launching of any kayaks or canoes has to be to the east of the dock? We can't make that in the order of conditions?
No, we can only say that there can't be any other alteration. So when inspections are done, that if it's found that there is alteration to that area to the west, then we can bring it forward for discussion, but I don't think we can tell them where they can, if it's a kind of a sandy area, that they can't launch their kayaks from there.
Okay, because that, due to the explanation that was given as to why they wanted the dock in this location, that, to me, indicated the type of increased activity in that area that we're trying to eliminate by moving the dock to the east. So that's the comment that I have.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would just suggest perhaps we could put explicit language in the order prohibiting any pruning of any of the shrubs along the shoreline there. They shouldn't be doing that anyway, but if we put it in the order, and if those things are allowed to grow out, I think that will go at least part way to addressing the concern that you're expressing.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that, John.
With that, can we have a motion on this?
I'll move to approve the notice of intent for 10 Captain Scott Road with the modification to the plan of moving the location of the dock 25 feet to the east on the shoreline, but otherwise not changing anything about the dock. And to include in the order of conditions an explicit prohibition of any further unapproved pruning along the shoreline. I think that covers it.
Okay, and I'll second that.
Okay. Comments, discussion?
Don't we need to include the storage as part of the
Yes,
condition?
you do. So I will,
There's a note on the plan that says it's to be outside the,
Yeah, I think they've already conceded the offsite
It'll be in
storage
the
outside
order.
the 50. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we have motion, it's been seconded, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 23 Mill Road. They requested a continuance to January 5th, 2022. Can we have a motion to continue this to that date?
Okay, I'll move that we continue the request for the notice of intent for 23 Mill Road, map 15, parcel U4-32.
We have a second, please?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Order of conditions. First is for 6 Saquatucket Point. Proposed addition, garage expansion, and septic update.
Just let me know if you have any comments on my draft.
Yeah, I have two, Amy. Under the special conditions, under the first one, number 1, it said limited work shall be staked, silt fence, backed, B-A-C-K-E-D, by straw wattles.
Oh, yep.
And number 7, I think we've talked about this before. So it says native mitigation planting shall be installed the same or next growing season at the start of construction on the addition. Is that right, or should it be at the completion of the construction of the addition?
I put it as start because all too often, after they do an addition and then the mitigation gets left off until the very end, or this gets forgotten to be done. So I prefer to see it at the beginning where the mitigation planting is not gonna have an impact, where they're not gonna be in the way of each other.
Right.
The construction versus the
And
mitigation.
that's the case here?
It is not in the way, so that's why, we see people, oh, we finished our addition, we want our certificate of compliance, by the way, we put our plants in yesterday. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Those are the only changes I had. Anyone have any other changes? Nope. Going, gone. Can we have a motion to approve?
Okay. I'll move to approve the order of conditions for 6 Saquatucket Point, map 8, parcel G1-9.
Second, please.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And next item on the agenda is a request to extend an order of conditions for 177 Forest Street. Mr. Saffron. Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Excuse me. Okay. I've been thinking, after Amy and I talked, the numbers we have here, you know, the depth of the original extension, all of these are done. What I wanted to, and Amy was on site for that. And what I wanted an extension for was there was a lot of debris in the sediment that got distributed around from the piles, that got moved around. I wanted to go through that, clean that up a little, and that's why I'd asked for the extension. But as we're getting into the winter season, I'm realizing it's more, to get things dug up, the stones and stuff like that. And so I'm not sure of the process here, but I'm thinking to put what I was gonna do over the next couple of months in the winter. It's gonna be a lot easier working with the soil in the springtime. And would like to put it into my hardscape plan that I'm getting worked on right now. So I'm not sure how that whole thing works. I had asked for an extension for 2 months, but that was to clean out a lot of the debris that got disseminated around the yard.
Yeah.
And it'll be a lot easier to do the whole property. Because right now it's just that one section. And so that's why I think a better way to go would be to put that into the hardscape plan.
So you wouldn't necessarily need an extension for the existing
No,
work?
he does.
I do.
I'll explain it.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
Is it okay if I go?
please.
Yes.
Okay. The outstanding items on the house have been addressed, which is putting the gutters, downspouts, and drywalls in. I would say at least 75% of the debris that had been stockpiled has been moved outside the 100-foot buffer. So you still do have some debris to remove. And then also that area, part of your extension was you were supposed to have done this by December 1st because the whole idea was that in the fall that you were going to be able to seed and stabilize that area in the 50-foot buffer zone, which because you've removed most of it and spread some material out, but it's too cold now to seed. So you haven't been able to revegetate or stabilize that. So you need an extension for that. And my recommendation would be to give you an extension until May 1st, actually, so longer than your 2 months, but that way you can get seed down in March or April. My recommendation is you close this out is that you that you get the rest of the debris out. I'm happy to come out and the rest that we saw, but there's just a little bit left. You're almost there. I mean, there's been substantial progress here. I want to say that. So there's been great progress. But you got to finish the debris removal and put down the native seed this spring. By adding what you're proposing for hardscape in, that would lead to another that would be an amendment and potentially a several-year extension. So my recommendation would be that you do as I'm suggesting, remove the rest of the debris, seed, get your certificate of compliance for this. File new for your new hardscape plan. Keep it separate. It's a similar process, because it would either be an amendment or a new notice of intent. You still have a filing fee, you still have to notify abutters, all of that.
Yep.
It keeps it cleaner in my mind. So that would be my recommendation to the board is you give him an extension so he can get the planting done, or the seeding done until May 1st. And that's my recommendation, that's a hard deadline. And then hopefully at that time, you're asking us for a certificate of compliance. And simultaneously, you might be applying for your hardscape. But I would say this spring, just make the effort to finish moving the last of the material and revegetating that, so.
When you say a hard deadline, May 1st, if it's not completed by that time, then
Fines
fines.
daily.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Steve, but we've been taking that stance, and we've given you several extensions, so I'm not
No,
trying.
I think the first is fair.
Yeah, I mean, you asked for 2 months, I'm essentially giving you 4 to 5, so,
Thank you.
yeah.
Let me just ask if anyone has any comments. Well, hearing none, then can we have a motion?
to grant an extension until May 1st for the work at 177 Forest Street, with the condition that if the work is not completed, that is seeding in the buffer area be completed by May 1st. Daily fines will commence on May 2nd. Daily fines of $300 a day will commence.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. You're good till May 1st?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Ernest, what did you say?
You're good till May 1st?
Thank you.
you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for 61 Lovers Lane, the construction of a dwelling on a pre-existing foundation and associated planning.
Since Mr. Lang is here, do you mind if we skip to 11 Riverbend, just so we can?
Not at all, nope. Okay.
If you don't mind, I'll explain to the commission kind of why we're here, and then you can speak if you feel the need.
Please.
So this was an update on violations. This is 11 Riverbend. So Mr. Lang, here's the new owner of the property. When the old owner requested the certificate of compliance, one of the conditions on that permit was that a walkway and float attachment be removed, and that wasn't done under that permit. So when the certificate of compliance issued, that was an outstanding condition. So Mr. Lang inherited that. We had a conversation. I went out and I saw the walkway was removed. So it was supposed to have been done
November 20th.
November 20-something. There's a float still out there.
Right, I mean,
Go
I
ahead.
hired Beacon Construction to remove both those docks and my own up on Riverside. And between their staffing and tides, they're supposed to be doing it this week, but they haven't showed up yet, so. And I haven't gotten a response back from them on exactly what day they're planning on, but it's been scheduled. I was able to get rid of all of the uprights on the walkway.
Yeah, I saw that.
There are a couple walkway boards that I need access to the neighbor's property because they're really heavy. And there's a gate in that we could get a trailer into to remove them as compared to dragging them through the marsh. So we left those up against the fence right now. I did bring a check for the $300. I apologize. I knew that there were issues that they had an affidavit that they had a dock for like 9 years, but no one was able to actually come up with anything but the original 1950 Chapter 91 license during the closing. I missed the date that things had to be removed. The letter was part of the closing documents, but we've already been actually working on a project. The seawalls there are in extremely bad shape. They've been falling down for so long that it's kind of hard to believe they're still up. But we've been working with Applied Coastal on engineering a new project to be coming back in front of you, both in a official and non-official, to get input that we'd like to be able to rebuild the entire seawall area and have that as a bay scallop hatcher or grow out facility and utilize the original 1950 Chapter 91 permit for the seawalls and dredging of that whole bay back out and be able to make it productive and useful for shellfish. So that's our goal, and I've been working with the engineering company working on that project and missed this one on getting that stuff out. But I do have an interest in applying for the after the fact for a floating dock only without any access to the land. In that I've been using that for a boat storage for both is really difficult to get through the Lower County Road Bridge. And so while we are working on our big plan to the opportunity for a 1 year only, 1 season only, to put a floating dock back in for 1 season while we're doing our big project, is something that I'd like to be able to still get through the application process and see if we can put a dock back in just for next year. But without any walkways to it at all. My neighbor lets me go through and get access to it and use his fresh water and stuff like that, so. And I just come down by boat, use a dinghy to get access to it from the river, so. Anyhow, my request is for you to either defer or to not fine me, but I did bring you the check in case you would say no, so.
I assume John Rendon has approved the floating dock then?
You know, those have been there, that's
Yeah.
just the docks that have been there on the property for like 10 to 12 years, I think.
Yeah, so the permit was originally for two float attachments to that bulkhead. There was 3, so that's why there was the one offending one, and then the walkway, which was supposed to have been removed in the old order. So that's
So is that the
been,
one right up next to the house is the offending one? Because there are 2 on the corner.
there's one on,
And then there's one right up next to the house that actually goes into it goes into muck at low
well,
tide.
that would be the one that we would want off.
You know, and that's, I have no problem
yeah.
with, I'm
You get
planning
2
on pulling them all.
on the outside.
That's right. Those
get
2 on
2
the outside,
Yep,
it's an L shape.
yes, so the little part of the L is that's not approved.
As compared to the long one up next to the house in the mud.
I'd have to,
'Cause
I'd
there are
have to look at
There are
it.
3 dock
Hold
sections.
on, I have your file, your
Okay.
file, I think. Oh, no, I don't. We can work on it. There's
Yeah.
2 that are permitted, one's not.
Okay.
It seems like, I mean, by removing the walkway, that was a big thing, so you're putting forth a good faith effort. You had until the beginning of the year, this coming year, to do that, so if you think Beacon can get that final float out.
I think they're getting it out this week. They're getting all of them.
Okay, so my recommendation is, I mean, we had issued a $300 one-time fine and then said, as of January 3rd or 2nd, whatever that Monday is, when we're actually in the office, that we would have daily fines if they weren't. It seems like he's making a good faith effort to get them out, so I'd recommend either you rescind the fine now, or you wait until the next meeting, don't have him pay it, and then maybe the next meeting is the 5th. Make sure if it's
They're all
out by
removed.
then rescind it then, but,
I'll get someone else to remove them. if
yeah,
they-
either one or
they
the
don't get
other,
done.
but I think being a new owner, you're putting forth a good effort to come into compliance, so, after years of it not being in compliance, so. It's your purview.
Yeah, I have no concerns with letting it go if you've got it all lined up. I mean, anybody else have any comments, concerns?
I would say rescind the fine when the structure's removed.
Okay.
So, we'll just touch base with me,
I'll update you as soon as they pull them.
and, yeah, we'll put it on the agenda for next time, but hopefully it'll be a quick and simple update that it's gone, you wouldn't even need necessarily to come,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you very much.
All righty, thank you.
And we look forward to actually being back with some exciting stuff on how we get some nitrogen out of the river. 'Cause, you know, getting that all rebuilt and back in shape
Yeah,
and structurally sound and looking good and actually harvesting nitrogen, I think can be a win-win for the whole river.
Sounds
Yep.
great. Yeah, wonderful. We'll look
Thank
forward to
you.
hearing from you.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Would you like to go back to?
Yeah, let's go back to Andrea Bessie.
Andrew, item on the agenda is a certificate of compliance for 61 Lovers Lane.
This was a permit that started in 2011 to rebuild a house on an old foundation that finally got finished. Was amended in 2015, transferred hands, blah, blah, blah. So it's finally in compliance. The the thing that was holding it up, the house has been there for a few years now, but the plantings, the first and second round of plantings didn't take well. So now the plantings have that order of conditions only required an 80% survival rate, and they've received that. We have a letter from the landscaper, and I did go out and take a look at the plants. So everything looks pretty good, so I'd recommend a certificate of compliance for 61 Lovers Lane.
Wonderful. So I'll move we approve the certificate of compliance for 61 Lovers Lane. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we have 3 sets of minutes.
Was there 3 sets on the agenda?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
January 6th.
I only have 2 on my site summary, but the agenda's different. Okay, I have 3 sets in front of me, so. Which one are you doing first?
January 6th is the first one.
Okay.
I had some comments on January 6th.
Okay,
Or
John.
questions, maybe?
Okay.
Let's see. On the second paragraph in 18 Captain Todd Way,
What page? Oh, page 3
is that what this is?
on the bottom.
Yeah, second well, it's not the bottom, second paragraph. It describes the entire hardscape as being 33,061 square feet, which
No.
I don't remember
No,
that lot, but that did not sound right to me.
no.
And then the last sentence in that
Strike that
paragraph,
sentence, it's not really that pertinent.
the last sentence in that paragraph says the sewer would be installed well within the 100-foot buffer, which also can't be true.
Outside.
Yeah, okay, so, there was one other little thing. Under 64 Snow Inn Road or 0 Snow Inn Road,
Hang on.
just
Yep.
the second sentence, he stated that part of this area had silted in overtime, as opposed to
Second.
2 words, please.
sentence.
Overtime. Overtime, not overtime. Are you with me?
Second sentence, you said, starts with Seth Wilkinson?
No, there's 2 64 Snow Inn
Oh,
Road
sorry.
ones, it's the second one. Second sentence, the first paragraph. He stated that part of this area had silted in overtime.
What paragraph?
First paragraph in the second 64 Snow Inn Road.
Oh, got it, sorry.
First paragraph, second sentence.
I got it. Finally, I have it, thank you.
Overtime
And
should be
overtime,
2 words.
2 words, yep. Got it,
That's it.
okay.
I've got one, minor one, very end, page 10, approval of minutes of October 21. In the title, change that to 2020.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
Good catch, you guys.
I like Carolyn, right, but we're trying.
Honest to God.
Anything more for that one?
That's all I had.
No.
I will make the comment that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The Snow Inn Road, that dock and pier project, before I forget, I'll just let you folks know, I did contact 2 groups about that pipe.
Oh, great, yes.
Yeah.
I did
Mass
talk
DOT.
with Don Liptak.
Right. I contacted Mass
Natural.
DOT, no response.
Yep.
Even though it was a pretty good contact of mine, so it's been a while. And then NRCS, it's a Natural Resource Conservation Service, and they, I think, have been in
He's
touch
been
with
in touch with me,
So
yep.
they may consider it as a possible project, so I'll let you know if DOT comes back on it.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you.
Did you say natural resource? Is that a state agency?
Federal, under Department of Agriculture. And they're involved with the Cape Cod Water Resources Restoration Plan, where they do stormwater projects, they help shellfish beds, they do fish run projects, they do salt marsh projects. They could possibly take an interest in this as a stormwater / shellfish project.
They're
Possibly.
located, they have a small office in Yarmouth.
Mhm.
Fabulous.
They're federal.
Great. Who's Christine Beriford?
The town hired her to catch up a few various boards and committees.
Oh, okay. Because she's down as recording secretary. I assumed she was at the meeting, but she wasn't. No, okay. All right,
No, she's taking them from the,
okay, good. So we have a motion to approve the minutes of January 6th, 2021, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second,
All in favor?
as amended,
As amended?
as amended.
Thank you.
And
Abstain.
I'm abstaining.
Me too,
Okay.
I abstain.
All right, thank you. So we have 6 in
0.
favor, 1 abstention.
Two
Two
abstentions.
abstentions.
so it's 502.
Okay, you two were not at the, okay, gotcha.
Right, we weren't at that meeting.
Gotcha. All right. Next item on the agenda, the minutes for September 1st, 2021 meeting. Page 2, 5 Trinity Cove, second paragraph. Oh, yeah, on page 2, Amy, under 5 Trinity Cove, second paragraph, Ms. Stephanie Sequin of Ryder and Wilcox, it should be. Find that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I will say the 28 Wawatesi transcription, it's hard to follow, and I don't know how to correct that or what to do about it. It's just, it's not clear, I think, to any reader as to what really happened there.
We can,
Oh,
I don't know.
hold on.
I don't think it's a big deal, obviously, but,
the 28 Wawatesi?
yeah, I don't know if those minutes could be used, you know, in the superseding processes or not. It just, I don't even know what,
So you just want elaboration, really, because there's, I see what you're saying.
yeah,
We can bring these back if you want, because, I mean, that is kind of an important one,
yeah.
since
yeah.
we,
Well, I haven't found that same concern in other paragraphs.
No,
If
that's-
For some reason, that
I don't know,
that paragraph, you can't really tell what
yep.
I was
We
looking
can
for.
flush that out and bring this back to you, because that one is under appeal, so I'd like those
Yeah.
to be good.
Oh, that's under appeal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still. That was a denial and.
Yeah, we had a site visit with
Yeah.
Callie from DEP.
DP will want to look at these minutes at some point, I would expect.
That wasn't part of the initial complaint that he filed against us, was it?
Yeah,
Complaint.
Oh, I thought that was a separate issue. I thought we resolved the complaint was primarily because of the porch, enclosure of the porch.
you're thinking of a different property.
Yeah.
There's no porch here, this is the,
It's the,
this is the
LeBlanc- I'm sorry,
walkway.
yes, I'm
The
completely
elevated
off, yeah.
walkway.
Yeah,
Oh, I know who you're thinking of.
yeah, okay.
No,
Go up-
that's resolved.
Mhm.
Go 2 paragraphs above that, Amy,
Mhm.
where it says, Mr. Crafty asked whether expiration date could be changed.
Changed.
Yeah. And, you know, as I read that paragraph, I had the same issue that Brad had with the following one. I didn't really understand what they were trying to say here.
And we were there, so, yeah, a reader would have trouble with that one. So yeah, sorry to ask you to untangle that one, Amy.
On page 2.
So just that's fine, we'll do it.
Michael, and right at the top where.
I got it.
Michael
Donovan?
and Mary Beth Donovan.
Yeah.
Second paragraph where you said, Mr. Crabtree asked what was meant by elevate existing maple.
By elevate existing maple. Branches were extending into the driveway, so the intention, yeah, I understood that. It was
Okay.
essentially pruning it up.
No, I meant
Elevate the
your
canopy.
No, I meant your first sentence by elevate.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I see what you're saying. I didn't have any
Okay.
question on that. Anybody else feel that's confusing?
No, not particularly.
Okay. the other comment I had was on page 5, Amy. The town warrant. So the,
Page 5.
oh, yes, under the discussion about the presentation of the proposed water dependent structures, bioalarm and
Oh,
wetland.
okay, page 4 for me, for some reason,
Okay.
okay.
The first sentence underneath the subtitle, the subparagraph,
Oh, yep, I see it. So the Mr. Crabtree,
yeah,
that.
those are the only other
Got it.
comments I have. Anybody else have anything on these?
Well, don't vote on these. I'll elaborate on those two. Melissa or I'll elaborate on those two areas.
Okay.
So we're gonna hold.
Then
You don't
we
need a
have-
motion or anything, I'll just hold them.
No. So then we have the minutes from October 6th. Next, under Evans on page 4. Where is Evans now? Page 4. Show should be showing.
Hmm?
There's a word "show" in this discussion on Evans that should be,
What paragraph?
I'm trying to
Oh,
find it
sorry.
right now. I should have been a little clearer when I
I
made
can
these
just put
comments.
show to shown and we can find it.
Yeah. Yeah, just do a word search and find show.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
Oh, next to last paragraph is what I had down here, so it's somewhere in that long
Pretty big
paragraph. Yeah.
paragraph. Yeah, we could probably break that up a little bit. Oh, I see it.
Good.
Evidence shown. Got it.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions, comments? Everybody was at this one as well.
That was a fun one.
So should we have a motion approve, I'll move we approve the minutes for October 6th, 2021.
Second.
Second, any discussion?
October, oh,
October 6th.
no, you're right. I had October 20th on here, I don't know why.
Okay, we got a second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes.
Okay.
Now, discussion and possible votes, proposed changes to the draft wetland protection bylaw.
We gotta do 7 Prince Charles first.
We do.
Update.
Yep.
Okay, sure.
So that was supposed to, the commission had me issue a fine for 7 Prince Charles because they had not removed the deck that was within the 0 to 50 by the time that we had given them to do that. So I issued the fine, immediately got a call from the homeowner, and asked that it could be delayed because, so his builder could do it, and I said, well, can ask the commission, but I don't know how that'll go. So the deck has now been removed. So that's a good thing.
Oh, it has, good.
The deck is gone.
Incentive, I
So I would recommend rescinding the fine. I think the whole point was to kind of poke them to get it removed. So I would recommend rescinding the fine. He removed the deck. And I'll work with him in the spring about replanting. But the fine was just because the deck wasn't removed. So I would recommend that you rescind the fine for 7 Prince Charles.
Okay, any discussion?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do we need a motion on this?
Yes, please.
I move we rescind the fine that was imposed on 7 Prince Charles for not removing the deck as it has been removed. We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Can I ask Amy a question on another fine while we're still on fines?
Sure.
The dock on Snow Inn Road, that,
I sent the violation and the fine, I have not heard from them. They
okay,
have the same deadline of beginning of January, I think January 2nd or 3rd to remove it,
yeah.
It's on the market.
otherwise they're good dailies.
Yeah, very damaging, just sitting right there, so, okay,
We haven't gotten it back, so it got there.
okay, so that's one that,
I was assuming we'd get a phone call, but we haven't.
all right,
I tried calling him, actually. I found his phone number. He owns a couple properties there,
yep,
and, didn't get a call back, so,
well, stay tuned, that would be one that we may want to not rescind.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Amy's included a copy of the revised article that we want to include in the town warrant for this May that outlines the changes that we propose for the Harwich Water Dependent Structures bylaw. Brad's commented on them, I know, and
Yeah, my comments didn't make it in, though,
they didn't.
no.
When did you give them to me?
I think the day after I got them, so what,
Before me, I know.
yeah.
Sorry, Brad, I thought I,
Well, you know, I don't think, they're that extensive, but
don't know how I missed that.
the one that I think does need to be changed is, on page 1, it says we require only 3 feet of depth at the seaward edge of the structure. That's that's the proposal. Presently, isn't it 2.5?
Yeah.
And is it just the seaward side, or is it all around?
Well, that's,
We had that
that's
question
the
come up.
current one, so I thought, hold on.
Yeah, the current's 2.5, and it's gonna go to 3 all around.
But is it just seaward?
No, it's all the way around, on all sides. I thought it
Yeah,
said that.
This says at the seaward edge.
right, but
No,
that,
I know,
but
but
that's,
I
but
thought I
it says,
changed that somewhere. Maybe I changed it in the regs. I could have made changes to the regs and not the bylaw by accident.
well, if you go down below, it does say the change is made. I thought I saw it. The 3 feet should be there.
Item K, isn't it?
You require 3 feet, hold on. Around all sides of float.
Yeah, yep, K is correct, as in terms of what we voted on, but I think that earlier intro,
The explanation, I probably didn't change it there.
yeah, it says
Yeah, by
that,
accident.
so that's 2.5.
And I'm not gonna say only. It'll be 3 feet.
I can either send it to you again, Amy, or I can just give you the one that I think is important.
You can just give it to me.
Okay. The last sentence on the first page, it says, "The cumulative impacts of a high density of structures is evident." I think actually there's a lot of questions over that. There's a lot of gray area, so I don't know if I'd say it's evident. What I suggested is the cumulative impacts from a high density of structures are a significant concern. And I don't know if, you know, if you agree with that or not. I think
do.
just to say it's evident, in a lot of cases, cumulative impacts are not evident. They're hard to,
I think that was language taken over from I think that's existing language.
is it,
Yeah.
from the
previous,
regs?
the existing bylaw. I don't think that's new language. I think it's, or somebody came up with that explanation, and I don't think it was
Yeah, well, I,
me, but we can definitely say the cumulative impacts from a high density of structures
are a significant concern.
are a significant concern.
Yeah, I don't know what, yeah, to say evident, I don't know where that would've come from. Trying to see if it's cumulative impact, we have a new statement. Yeah, it's not in the new statement under definitions.
Cumulative impact, the effect.
Yep. And the last one that I think that should be changed is on, let's see, page 3, where it says no structures will no new structures will be allowed, and that number A is Round Cove and B is Herring River. This was one of the sticky points when Ernie and I met with the selectmen. They wanted to be positive that it wouldn't apply to pre-existing structures. And so I'm suggesting to take that sentence in A, that last sentence, it says, "This prohibition does not apply to existing licensed structures or to the maintenance of existing licensed structures," and add that sentence to B as well. And I don't know if that's redundant, but
It's okay.
that was kind
It
of a
was
sticky.
important enough to them. It
Yeah.
Wouldn't matter if it's redundant. I think.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, I think that's,
I can do that.
yeah, those are,
That's, sorry about that. I don't know if I got mixed up somehow.
You want to just
Shouldn't have.
ship us a new copy next
I
meeting?
will, yeah. I think we should, I'd like to schedule to have a meeting with the
Yep.
Board of Selectmen about it, so they could formally decide whether or not to.
do you
I mean,
want,
they're putting it on the warrant, but it would be nice to get their support.
I would suggest we vote on it tonight, just because those are pretty minor edits. Is there a reason not to vote on it tonight,
I'm fine with the changes you've made, Brad.
after discussion?
So, Jamie, you're still filming, right?
I am, yeah, no, there's nobody on the thing.
Okay.
And you're on your last item, so.
Yeah, second to last.
Yep.
He's joining.
Any discussion on,
As long as we're still on.
Yeah, no, you're on.
everybody comfortable with the changes that we've outlined and that are in the document?
Yes.
Talked about them before. I just, yeah, I needed to clarify. Sorry.
All right. So can we have a motion to approve the changes to the water-dependent structures bylaw?
I'll move to approve the changes as given in the document that we're considering here with the changes that have been discussed by Brad.
Great, good. And second?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mark, was that an aye?
No, I oppose.
Opposed?
Yep.
Okay,
I abstain because I really wasn't involved in all this.
so 5 in favor, 1 abstention, one opposed.
Mhm.
The last item on the agenda, we'll get to talk about cranberry vines.
Why don't, so what I would recommend, Alan, is because I would recommend that you abstain, or you leave the meeting as a commissioner and sit in the audience if you want to discuss it. And we can just, you can discuss it from there, but not be a seated member of the commission, so ask if you could excuse yourself.
Can I be excused to sit in the public forum?
Recuse himself.
Recuse myself?
Yeah,
We have to
you
have a
don't need a
motion.
motion, you have to
I'm
say,
perfectly fine with that.
Okay. Thank you.
just so there's no
Yes.
question of propriety.
Yes.
So I guess I'll introduce it real quick, but, and then Alan, please chime in, you can sit at the table if you want, so we can hear you. Alan had approached, Megan Eldridge, our assistant town administrator, with the idea of putting out, an RFP to see if anybody wanted to, harvest the vines off one of the bogs, one of the more recently harvested bogs in the Bell's Neck, and also a little bit of surplus equipment that's still there. And I had said, first, it's under the care and custody of conservation, and then also, so Conservation Commission should obviously weigh in on that. And then in terms of, we can talk about this too, the agricultural exemption. Just basically, if we're gonna allow this to happen, that and which I would recommend that we do, I think it's hopefully a good use, and reuse. But does it need to have a permit from conservation or not? I don't think that's a deal breaker in any way, but it's just one little added step. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to you, if that's cool.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to talk in front of you. My whole motion behind this is to continue agriculture in the town of Harwich. That's one of the reasons why I joined the Conservation Board. As a part-time, working towards being a full-time agricultural farmer myself once I retire, it's my goal to continue the heritage of Harwich and keep cranberries alive. That cranberry bog, you folks voted last year, or this year rather, to naturalize it. and you had some different plans and concepts. So, as a member, I want to move forward with getting something in motion and keeping it active as far as cranberries on a portion of that cranberry bog. We've discussed the surplus equipment, the irrigation pump. There was questions of who owns it, who doesn't own it. I believe the town of Harwich owns it, so therefore that's why I'm suggesting we do this route with the surplus equipment. And we can put that out to bid, and if anybody wants to bid on it, they can buy it through the surplus equipment motion. That way there, it removes it from the pump house, it gets it off the property, it cleans up that side of the property, and maybe in that whole draft of that bid, they could remove the pump house also, whoever takes the engine. And that would be something that I think the management plan of BSC indicated in the process. Moving on to the cranberry vines. The cranberry vines, in my opinion, mowing them, pruning them, that is an exempt activity in the normal process of cranberry culture. It's an activity that is not regulatory. It's exempt and under agricultural use. Numerous growers throughout the state of Massachusetts, Wisconsin, New Jersey prune their bogs annually, semi-annually, sell the vines for reproduction in other bogs, or they also have bogs that are just strictly growing cranberry vines for cultivation to sell. Doing this on that area, I included the map, as you drive in the parcel of the land to the left towards the inlet flume, there's an area that was rebuilt in about 1995 by Bob Cottrell, one of the leasees, and he actually excavated out probably 3/4 of an acre of upland and made that section of cranberry vines that I'm speaking of. Those vines are a certain variety called the Stevens vines. They're a high yielding cranberry vine. They usually yield 200 to 300, 400 barrels per acre. That area has had good success when there was cranberry was being harvested there. The question of active or inactive, you have a 5-year window. You voted this year, it's still an active cranberry bog set, in my opinion. So therefore, we wouldn't need any regulatory review or approval. Harvesting the vines would be done by, you would put it in a bid form. There'd be an area of 100 feet by 100 feet. Within that area, you could capture 2.5 tons of vines that could be transplanted onto other bogs. And I've gotten that information from a leading cranberry grower in the town of Wareham, Shore Cranberries, Matt Beaton. Family's been in it for 5 or 6 generations. He actually takes vines off bogs, bales them, sells them. So he gave me that equation. It depends, if the variety is really rank, you could get more tons per 100 by 100. But I'm looking to just get opportunity of 100 foot by 100 foot, because I have an area that I want to revitalize, renovate, and put in the higher yielding cranberry vines. And it takes 1 ton per acre to plant. So if I mow more, whatever the successful bid, it would be bidded out. Other growers may be interested in that too, because there's other areas. The state has given out a lot of money this year in grants to refurbish and put in higher yielding varieties. And this may be an opportunity to harvest some vines and make some money, keep that active, because that would be an activity that would continue farming, agriculture. If you timestamp it in April of 2022, that gives us another 5 years of agricultural exemption to 2027 on that particular parcel, which is a good thing in my opinion. We would have to devise the structure of the bid package through the town administrator, Megan. She would put that out, it'd be an RFP. The successful bidder would be the highest bidder per that area, 100 by 100, and then they would be awarded the bid based on just my opinion of that, how that could flow. The vines, you probably ask, if we mow them, are they gonna die? Well, the vines, they will be set back, but what I would suggest is if we just open up one board in the flume and get the water level after it's cut and put them in the bottom base of the vines, they'll refurbish themselves. And the cutting should happen around April 15th and no later than May 15th. That's usually the cutting time, pruning, and then the replanting time. So that would be the window of opportunity. I wouldn't go any further than May 15th. that way there, you know, you could, if you wanted to, you could even put in the bid docs that they can put some 5-10-5 fertilizer out there where they cut, and the vines will just regrow. You won't have any cranberries in that spot that year, but the vine growth, the roots are still there. It's just cutting off the top uprights. Any questions? I guess that's pretty much it.
Amy, you want to give us your thoughts on this?
This one, it's a little difficult to say that whether or not, in my opinion, whether or not it's land in agricultural use or not. It's pretty close to, I mean, I think the last harvest, I'd have to talk to Craig, but from my recollection is 2016, 2017 for that area, so you're coming up on the 5 years. So potentially it's within 5 years of the last harvest. And then the argument of that it's still in agricultural use because people have been hand picking them, I believe that one of the requirements is that it has to be for commercial use. So no profit was turned off those bogs in the past since to about 2016 or 2017, right around there, that season. So that people have been hand picking them, in the past couple of years, I don't think that meets the definition of for the exemption of land and agricultural use. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the commission did vote, well, they voted to let people continue to hand pick, but also to naturalize those bogs. So I don't know how that plays into the whole, whether it's agriculture or not, since the commission had deemed not to put those bogs out to lease again. And then again, you're harvesting the vines. It's not going to be used at this site. They're being taken off to another site. So does that make a difference into the definition of normal and routine maintenance of land and agricultural use? So I would say to err on the safe side, because I don't think it's going to take too long, my recommendation is to not even think about the exemption necessarily and just prepare an RDA for that the town would prepare an RDA to do these activities, and then that shouldn't take very long at all. It probably is something that we can accomplish pretty quickly. We would just want to make sure that the area wouldn't be so damaged that it would require replanting and stuff like that. But that's it's a little foggy because this land has not been farmed commercially since around 2016, 2017. And the commission did vote not to lease it again. I'm not 100% clear.
May I give a couple more things? Through the Cape Cod Cranberry Growers Association, they also have advisories. It talks about bogs in disrepair, and it talks about the activities. And activities, 5 years. One part of that is a crop. You don't have to grow a crop in 5 years. Normal maintenance could be pulling the boards. Somebody flooded that bog 2 or 3 times in the last 5 years.
Right.
That's normal activities of cranberry growing. So those activities, the crop is one part of the farm. You could try to grow cranberries for 5 years and not be successful and be wiped out by pests, frost, winter kill, and many other numerous things, vandalism. So that's one part of it, just to maybe help that situation. But it's a pretty simple task. You know, you're not asking, it's not going to be invasive to the property. It'd be just a square area, 100 feet by 100 feet. I'd hate to see the vines go away and not have any use and recycle them. Be a shame.
Yeah, I agree with you. 'Cause when we originally were talking about proposals for and options for these bogs, my recollection is that we did talk about maintaining that northern bog for public access, which I think we have, and I think you mentioned that you knew somebody mentioned that they knew who would pull the boards to allow some flooding to take place.
Well, that was done in coordination with Amy Hines and mosquito control.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That was so we don't have an exploding mosquito population.
right.
Yeah, but nonetheless, it is still
It's done.
accomplished
Yeah.
a benefit for the bog, right?
Well, yeah, for me, I don't know why do we have to talk about having ag exemption for this, because I think we voted to support having the vines recycled. I believe we did vote that, so, I think it's something that is
I don't
probably very
remember.
supportable. We had a Zoom call that you were on,
Go on, yeah.
and I thought
I
we.
suggested that.
Yeah, I think we agreed with the concept. I thought we even voted to support that, but,
I'd have to find it, I don't,
Before I was a member.
well, either way, it sounds like we have to go to surplus. Is that what you?
yeah, well, right, so
Trying
you
to
have to
find the
put out
easiest
an
method.
RFP.
So
I'm for it, I just wanna make sure we're doing everything the right
Yeah,
way.
No, and so don't we, and
I'm
I
all
think I'm
for
just
it.
trying to make it simple, and
John looks.
But I don't think this
perplexed.
situation qualifies for an ag exemption in the eyes of DEP. I think, and I do think, I've talked to Craig Williams several times, and I think he abandoned the bogs prior to the 2017 harvest. So, and then we voted to have a certain management path. So I think trying to claim that it gets an ag exemption for this activity is really not appropriate.
So, if I understand what you're saying, Amy, is you support this activity, you just don't think,
I think it needs an RDA.
you think it needs an RDA, so that seems like the path of least resistance to me, and we should just follow that path. I mean, I'm not against this. I have a question, which is, what is the total area there in the blue outline, that you outlined the area has the Stevens variety in it? What you're talking about is a little less than 1/4 of an acre to cut to get your 2.5 tons. What is that, 3/4 of an acre or
it's an
something?
acre and a half or so
Oh, it's an
on the,
acre.
That's
on the
big.
Mass GIS map, and I would
Okay.
probably do it at the most northern point on that parcel, looking at that section, because there's a landing right there, so you can just
Easy.
take a machine down there, mow them, gather them, take them off, and no impact on anything, because there's a flume in the ditch that you have a ramp there, or culvert rather, not a flume.
Right, so, personally, it sounds like a good idea to me. I just wouldn't wanna see the whole thing cut in 1 year. I mean,
And that's why I'm only saying 100 by 100.
How long does it take for, given that we're not really managing this area, or at the most, I don't know whether people would agree to flooding it once, but if you just leave it alone, you cut it and just leave it,
Some vines will come back if you don't fertilize it, don't do anything. Some will come back, but a lot of it won't come back.
it won't come back at all.
So you
Well,
need
it
to add
will, but
some
it'll be
water.
sparse. It will be sparse. But if you have a wet spring, it will, if it rains a
Or-
lot,
So if you flooded the
Flood it.
bog,
just raise the bog level up. Don't flood it. Just put the
Yeah, that's
water in
what
the
I meant.
ditches.
I see.
So the root system gets wet and it,
Well, that would be, I mean, a cranberry is a wetland plant, so in order to not have an adverse impact, like a severe adverse impact, has nothing to do with necessarily with agriculture, but it would, if you approve this when you do an RDA for it, then that would be a condition that we'd have to change the water level for a certain period of time, so the plants don't die.
So, but don't we wanna do that anyway? I mean, if we're managing this area and 1.5 acres of the area has, at the moment, thriving cranberry plants on it, even if there's some other stuff growing in there, there's still healthy cranberry plants, right? Then part of the ongoing management, aside from cutting it, you'd still want to manage the water levels so those plants continue to thrive, right? Or not. I mean, but if you don't, what you're saying is the cranberry plants would die, then you have to worry about what's gonna grow there in their place, right?
Well, that's what the management plan's all about, and we haven't progressed on updating the Bell's Neck Conservation Area Management Plan. We voted on a path among 3 or 4 options, and so that's naturalization. We haven't, the details are to be in the update of that plan, and we haven't
Yes, we
progressed
don't
it.
have that yet.
We haven't progressed.
Through part of that discussion, Brad, one of the details that I believe we had outlined in it was to leave that particular section of bog available for
Pick your
whatever
own.
the particular use would be. I think, given the conversations we've had, I don't think this activity is out of line with that at all. I think it would
Oh,
be
no.
conducive.
No, I agree with you totally. But in
Think about
terms of, setting a process on board management, that needs to be in the plan. I can support what Alan's putting out there easily. I think it's a good concept. I just think it does need to be an RDA. I almost could support it as administrative review, but, you know, you can do an RDA in your sleep. It's just, it's not that hard.
Yeah, what I could do is I can't be a conflict, so I could do a boilerplate form, but as far as the information that goes into that, I would need that information from somebody.
So maybe the Agricultural Commission could do that. They could support that RDA
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah,
That would be a mechanism that could make this go forward.
but the form itself is something I can bang out
Yeah,
real
it's
easy.
a pretty, you know, minor lift to
It's
produce
small.
an RDA, and for this
Yeah.
task here, so
So I asked though, in an RDA, it's a request of determination, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are we determining? If it's agriculture or non-agriculture?
no, that's not what it determines. It's how it relates to the Wetlands Protection Act. And, you know, is it in the
The activity.
resource area? Yes, no, you know, will it impact?
Yeah.
It's,
Will the work have an adverse impact? We're not asking about the use.
I don't think you'll have a problem with this commission to support what you're doing. I just believe that saying it's under agricultural exemption is not appropriate, and I think the ship has sailed for that. Craig Williams could probably give us his last, DP wants to see invoices, they want to see sales. So he could tell us when he last sold cranberries.
I can get that from him tomorrow.
Yeah,
When he walked away, I think it was in August of a year. It was before he harvested, so that would be considered a growing year still.
Of
so was it
17?
16 or 17?
It was
I
that
don't know, I don't know.
hailstorm, we
I'll
had
find
that
out. I'll find
hailstorm.
out.
It was the
But it was,
hailstorm,
I
yeah.
remember it, and whoever flooded it that summer, they
Yeah.
put it underwater.
Yeah. Now, I'll jump ahead, just so we mentioned you talking to him. Ask him about the pump house, because
Oh, I have.
doesn't he say he feels the engine's his?
I'm not gonna say it publicly, but he said he spent money on it.
Yeah. So have that conversation.
So that's why I'm saying if it's a gray area right now, where he walked away, as it's been said, I didn't say this, but others said he walked away from the lease, then that's surplus equipment.
Yep.
And the town owns it, so this would be a mechanism for us to get it out of there.
I fully support the concept, to just have those appropriate conversations with the last guy.
I'll find the timeline, yeah.
Yeah, and figure all that out. But
We can find out too in the last year he paid, because we have that in the selectman's office.
yeah.
The last year he paid for his lease.
He asked me at one point, as chair, he goes, "Can I grab that engine?" And I said, I can't, you know, that's not for me to say one way or the other.
This makes it cleaner, I think.
What you're proposing is the right way to do it. It just,
Yeah.
that I think the ag exemption, I don't think it applies.
I
We
can help
voted-
you out.
We voted to go a different direction. DEP is gonna look at all that and say, how can you, and I don't think it holds you back. I really don't. An RDA, I could prepare an RDA for you in a couple hours. It really isn't, that much to do. So,
All right.
and I'd like to say I could help you, I just don't wanna be in a conflict.
I'm
I'd
not a
appreciate
voter.
your support.
Yeah.
Any
Okay.
other questions, or?
I don't think you have general.
I would urge that we
Sure.
try to find the time to move on that plan, because it tends to be looked at in limbo if we're not, if we don't have a definitive
Yeah.
plan.
We'll see what next meeting looks like
So
in
what
terms of load.
What I've got is, as far as takeaway, so you'll find out when it was last harvested then. Then we need, I think we need the actual wording of what we voted on.
Yeah, I'm gonna find
approved.
that.
So we need to see that, the RDA, of course, and then we gotta develop that plan to
Mhm.
maintain these.
I do think what we voted on in the past might not be relevant, because as a commission member, I think you have to do this above board, and I think the surplus route is, if you want to bid on it, I think that's the way it needs to
Yeah.
be.
Well, that's the way
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever we voted in the past, we were all happy to say, yeah, come in and take them. We were happy for your interest, but I think now it has to be done in the surplus mode. So,
Well, it opens up to others too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the right way to do it.
maybe a couple people get to use the vines. I mean, the cranberries are amazing. I can't believe how big they are in that little corner.
Well, maybe if we each give the town $10 and that. The other thing, though, as far as maintaining the bogs, who would do that?
Well, we gotta talk about that we basically said, other than invasive removal, we're not maintaining. So about this whole flooding, do we even have water rights? anymore. I mean, the land is, once the land is not an agricultural use, I mean, to be able to manipulate water is something else too.
Yeah.
Information came on the table that the water rights had lapsed.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think they have. I would argue that, as, under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission, we can manage that property as we want to maintain the wetlands.
But we would have to file a notice of intent just, in order to do that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gray area. I would also argue that the herring warden in the town could manage those boards to prevent herring from migrating in there.
Could do that, yes.
That's not, keeping things wet for the plants, but I think in discussion with Hines and mosquito control, that it seemed easy. We would just keep it, discussion, talk about things, not let it get too wet for mosquitoes, prevent herring from getting in there. But it needs to be more detailed than that, because we voted to have some sections, progress towards
Right.
naturalization, other sections. In the language we voted on, there's still the idea of having some type of a, interaction with a group that wants to grow something there. The tech school, it could be a piece of what Leo was talking about. In the upland section, who knows, there could be Christmas trees or some kind of shrubs or something. So there's still some concepts that could be explored. We just voted to naturalize the bulk of it and not enter into a lease again for a cranberry farming operation.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I would, and I respect RDA and all that stuff, but I would still move on the strength of agricultural exemption, just for what you just mentioned. Because all those activities will still have to be exempt. Or you'll have to go through paperwork and paperwork and paperwork, and then nothing will get done, it'll grow up. Selling the vines would be a receipt. That keeps the agricultural intent. It keeps it going forward. Because the vines, that's a commodity. That's part of agriculture.
It's very
I'm
logical.
just trying to
Yeah, no, it's totally
forward
logical.
thinking.
Yeah, it's totally logical for you to make that argument. I've battled with agricultural exemption for decades in my business. It's, people have pushed the envelope again and again. And so I'm a little sensitive to that, and I think in this situation, I do believe the ship has sailed.
Well, is it possible that even if the agricultural exemption is lapsed, what's to prevent us from reinstating it essentially by selling the vines?
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean.
Do I reinstate?
You have to
Why would you
put
want-
land back in agricultural use.
There's a wetland
Yeah, no.
rule about abandoning cranberry bogs, and this isn't
Yes.
abandoned, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's a mechanism for abandoning cranberry bogs
Right.
through the Wetlands Protection Act.
Yeah.
So there is a form for that, but in my opinion, this isn't abandoned, not
Mhm.
yet.
Right. I think the key is gonna be that date that you're gonna find for us. It's gonna be important.
It's activities, remember that
Yeah,
key word,
it's not-
activities.
Yeah.
Flooding the bog,
So flooding
mowing,
it, yeah.
all those things are activities, and that's the intent.
Yeah, see, I don't, my communication with DEP is they want to see a sale. And they're going to see that the deliberations that this commission had, and they're going to say, that's not the intent. The intent is to not lease it for a bog. So we could revisit, some component of that. That's perfectly possible. But I don't think it's the right approach. It makes a lot of sense for you to advocate that, and I get that. You're a farmer. I don't know why this commission would not say that this should be an RDA. The same goal can be reached, so I don't know what the ag, to me, kind of is a little bit of an end around.
So you're suggesting that if we establish it's still in ag use, that we don't need an RDA?
Oh, that's the whole purpose. That's what
Oh.
Cranberry Bog farmers have done forever, is to just do what they need to do under an ag exemption.
Yeah, if an RDA is that simple to put together, why not just go that route?
That's
rather
my question, is why do we need to have that end around in this situation? I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think we should be advocating for it as a commission. I do think we need to get our act together and get that plan together. It says what we want to do. I mean, we've had public hearings on options, and people can come forward and say, yeah, I want to have an educational component with a tech school and do this. We didn't really bring in those type of comments. So, we're starting on invasive plant control, that's good. We should keep going with that, and I think we gotta figure out about board management,
Mhm.
Mosquito control wants to keep it dry, but they don't really have any jurisdiction here. Unless, I guess, things get really bad with mosquitoes.
Why would they flood it if they want to keep it drier?
Keep
If
water
that's why they
moving,
flooded it the last time?
keep water moving.
They want water moving at low levels, and, yeah, they didn't really want flooding.
We didn't wanna keep it dry though, because there would have been I had made the point that it would be such an alteration from either keeping water in the ditches pretty consistently or flooding it constantly to completely, well, some of the areas, like the southern end, it's not gonna completely dry out. It's kind of more of a wetter bog area. But on the northern area, it would just be a really quick change for plants and animals to adapt to just stop putting water in altogether. So it has to be like a gradual change for things to adapt better.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the flooding that was done in the past, from what I recall being down there, was to keep the bog flooded and wet, because it didn't know what we're gonna do with the bog.
That was part of it, yep.
And that was to keep it so the vines would stay viable.
Yep.
And from the frost in the spring, as I recall, and so that's an activity.
Yep.
And that was done a couple of years in a row, past the 16, 17.
Yeah, no, that was,
Right.
Yeah, but who did that? The commission we didn't vote to do that.
There was a conversation, and there was agreement
yes.
that it should be done, and I was the individual that took it on myself to act on it.
Right, yeah, I don't think
I
that was.
think we did that not knowing what our final decision was going to be on
It was.
the bogs.
That's
Probably
correct.
18 or 19, 2018 or 2019 that we
Right,
did
so
that.
would that be the basis for your claim for agricultural exemption?
That would be my basis.
Yes.
I don't see why not,
Yeah.
because it was a continuation of a circumstance that was undecided. It was indecision. I've been pushing for answers. I mean, my quest there was 3 years long, and within that 3-year window, there was no action.
That's
No
not correct,
action
Mark. You know that-
continued.
you know that's
Finally,
not
we
correct.
came there.
There was several hearings in that time.
There were hearings and there was conversation, but there was still never any decision. So in that window of time of no decision is when the activity did continue.
Yeah.
In the intent of preservation to not have anything retard further. And there was no opposition to that. Everybody seemed to be pretty much on the same page that we wanted to keep things status quo, keep things as healthy as we can, and let's continue to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know how that went. I don't know if that was a vote or how that went. I remember seeing the bog flooded and not knowing why it was
I
flooded.
think we need to find the documentation from these meetings.
Yeah, I don't recall you being before this committee saying, I want to pull those boards. I don't remember that happening
It was more of a general conversation.
outside of this commission.
No, it was in a group setting.
And we directed Heinz to pull or flood.
At one point,
We did.
yep, at one point Heinz did pull boards.
Yeah.
Um,
And added boards to flood,
yes,
because I was with them.
And I don't really object to all that, but it just seems to be, is that the basis we're going to seek agricultural exemption?
So, there's clearly disagreement here, but what I wanna know is, who has the final say about what is the process, and who is it that makes the determination that there is or is not a valid agricultural exemption there?
I believe eventually it's DEP.
Well, if you went to a determination, if one of your requests for a determination was, is this an exempt activity, and you would cite the exemption, you would cite the agricultural exemption.
I'm sorry, Amy, but in what case would you be doing this, citing that in what, an RDA, are you saying?
That's
That
one
would-
of the options in an RDA, is to file an RDA and say, we're exempt from the Wetlands Protection Act because of agriculture, so we do not have to file a notice of intent or do further activity. So you can do that. And then, but I mean, my suggestion is that you don't go that route. It's not even to touch the exemption. My just recommendation is to file the RDA saying that the work is not gonna have an adverse impact. And then go about it that way, just to get it done.
So,
And then, but for the RDA, so we determine, the commission will determine whether or not it meets the agricultural exemption. If somebody disagrees with that, they can appeal that. If DEP and DEP can either uphold it or supersede it.
so either way, we file an RDA. You, the Agricultural Commission.
The town files it.
Department files an RDA. If the RDA claims or requests permission based on there being no adverse impact, or the RDA requests an agricultural, or claims that an agricultural exemption is appropriate. So, and if the RDA says there's no adverse impact here, then it probably never goes beyond the Conservation Commission. If the RDA says that an agricultural exemption is appropriate, it might or might not go beyond.
Well, both of them go to DEP. I mean, they don't look, to be honest, they don't really look at RDAs. They don't
Right.
look at determinations. I mean,
But-
not
but-
that heavily,
So
so.
it would ride on whether somebody objected to that. And
Right,
also,
right.
it's a question of whether everybody on the commission would agree to vote to approve an RDA claiming an agricultural exemption versus voting on an RDA that just says there's no adverse impact here.
Depends on what's submitted.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of the question here, and so it's pretty clear that most of us would go along with the no adverse impact. Seems like there's a question about, it would be a tougher thing for the commission, I think, because there would be more extensive discussion about whether that's the right thing to do,
Right.
as there is now, right?
That's why I'm suggesting that you
So-
go the route of checking the box that says that this work doesn't need,
So if the objective here is simply to get those vines, seems like just doing what Amy is suggesting. If you have larger objectives here, then we have a bigger discussion to have. That's what it seems like to me.
I would go an easy route. I see, with Mark's actions and your actions, we're not far from conflict of interest, and so I would really not make this harder than it needs to be.
I don't want any conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do this as a public or
Yeah.
citizen outside of this, and that's why I'm recused and sit
Yeah,
over
yeah.
here for many years.
I
So-
know, but it's still close, because you're here talking about it, so
Yeah, but I'm recused myself when I'm talking about it.
I understand, but you're having conversations, I think it's close to that concern. So I think we all agree it's a good idea for farmers to get access to the vines. Let's make it happen.
I mean, it might not be me
Right.
bidding on it, it might be somebody else bidding.
Yeah, I think a
Right.
lot of it's gonna hinge on the language that Amy's digging up.
Yep.
On our prior votes.
I'll get that.
If we included in those votes the potential harvesting of the vines as being a good thing for those bogs back before there was any conflicts or anything like that, then I'm comfortable with moving ahead with this, and I don't think anyone can challenge us.
No, and I'm comfortable even without those votes, because I think it still is a good idea. And I think by going to surplus, you really reduce the potential for any conflicts.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think it's fine.
Yeah, you're doing this right.
Been a procurement officer in Massachusetts, so I know.
Right. Let me ask you about the water withdrawal permit from DEP.
We'd have to call them and find out.
Right, and that requires,
You had to pay $200 a year or whatever. We had to pay, but it's good for 5 years now. They extended it. And then there was a time period too with Deval Patrick extended it with the laws
Right.
extended. So there's a lot of those. We'd have to just look at the timelines.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
need to apply to DEP to get permission to raise the boards?
No, there's a water withdrawal permit that they have that you have to file
To manage,
To
to
manage the
manage water
water
levels,
flow.
yes,
for the
Yes.
bog purpose, for the cranberries.
yeah. There's just a lot of bureaucracy.
I don't wanna belabor things for any of us here, I just wanna keep the bogs and the
No, let's do
viability
it.
going and keep it
Yeah.
going and keep it
I
simple. I'm
think
just
we're all
trying to look
with
at the
you.
route to keep it simple, cause once you get complicated checking boxes, all this stuff, those boxes never end.
Yeah.
And then we're always
No,
fighting the
No.
battles.
I hear you, and I think we're all on board. Our discussions all along have been to do what we felt was the right thing with those bogs, and to the extent we can preserve them, or at least harvest them and leave public access open for them too, then I think that's all a win-win, really.
I'll wait
Alright.
till you're in discussion, then I'll come back on the other side.
I will follow up with that for you.
Okay, good,
Thank you.
wonderful. Okay,
I have nothing else for you.
nothing else. We have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Ross, thanks. I'm not coming tomorrow.